So,
Good luck.
how do I turn on?
I don't know.
How do I turn on? I'm on? I have been on? Okay. All right. I love you. Thank you so much. Okay. As she so graciously said, we've known each other for a long time, and I will tell you the project we did at the health department with pregnant women that we saw through our prenatal clinic, when we had prenatal clinic, won all kinds of awards because we just blew it out of the water. And you know, a lot of you guys realize anybody that's really coming, and I mean this in a good way, I love the health department, but coming to the health department, you can make them high risk. There's often so many things going on in their life. So it was an easy blend to just say, this is part of it. You know, you see me as a nurse, you're going to see her as a social worker. This is just the way it works. So it wasn't, we weren't treating them any differently. Like we weren't saying, you have to do this, but you don't. So it really was really good. So I'm really excited that she brought that up. I hadn't thought about that in a while. So we're going to talk about the circles. Okay, what do I need to? Y'all, I am.
Let me see really quick. Press the down arrow to change your slides.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. This is what I hope you'll take away today. Let's see if I can. You'll understand the circles. We all live in circles, okay? And a lot of time we feel like we're spinning in circles, but we're going to try to put it in a context that will help you maybe have some aha moments. That's really something I'm hoping everybody will have. We're also going to learn different ways to build connections when you understand the different circles and the life experiences in those circles and how you might be able to effectively help someone. Hang on. We're going to see how your background affects how you work with other people, and you may not even realize some of your stereotypes or some of your beliefs or thoughts are coming across when you're dealing with someone. So we're going to really explore the circles. Now, a little bit of it, you got to get into it. I've tried to do everything to keep all learning styles involved. So there'll be color, there's going to be participation. The good thing to know is there are no right or wrong. So it doesn't matter what you shout out. If I ask for shout outs, you're not ever going to be wrong. So a lot of people are always afraid to kind of say something, you know, because then they're thinking, well, what if I look stupid amongst my peers? You don't have to worry about that, because anything you won't want to talk about, we can put in circles. Anything. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Now, I do need to ask for volunteers. It will be no problem. I keep looking at you. Would you be my volunteer? It's easy. It's easy, super easy. So we're supposed to go to 10, and when we start talking about circles, because as you can probably tell a little bit from my personality, when I say we can talk about anything, we can talk about anything, I can get really off track because we're so focused on what you all want. And that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do is toward the end of the presentation, you all tell me what you want to talk about in circles. So we finish at 10. So I thought maybe 10 till, if you could let me know time, okay? Y'all feel good about that? That way we can have some fun at the end. Okay. Explore how we can bridge these gaps. Once you understand the circles a little bit better and how they all affect everybody, then hopefully you can bridge some gaps, because I can tell you every day I see this. Every day I experience an aha moment where I go, wow, that was another example of circles. So in this, I'm going to probably give you more examples than you want to know, but then you can take those examples because each of you have the same stories, okay? You just may not know it. Okay, so what are the circles? So let's just get started. So I used to, you know, in old technology, which you can tell I'm older than many of you all in the room, we use flip charts. Do y'all remember flip charts? Okay, so then we would write all over the flip charts and you could kind of see it. But what we're going to do is we're going to use circles, true examples of circles, to represent poor, the people who are in poverty, the people who are poor. We're going to use a circle to represent middle class, and we're going to use a circle to represent wealthy. Now, I have to bring wealthy in because it really is connected to the other circles. We have to talk about middle class because it's right in the middle, okay? We have to talk about poverty because really, you guys, there's so much going on in that circle, it's sometimes hard for people to understand. So then when we look at the circles, this is really a little bit better presentation. When we look at the circles, by far, huge bigger circle of people living in poverty. Now you've got to remember too, in that circle you have a beginning of the circle, or sort of one side of the circle, and then you have another side of the circle. So some people are destitute poor, and then some people are just hovering. You know, a lot of middle classes hovering where they could kind of slide back and forth, okay? And in this representation, I want to show you about wealthy. This is really what's happening. Wealthy is getting wealthier. They are getting exponentially wealthier, okay? Middle class is actually shrinking and being stretched. And then you've got the poor circle continuing to grow. So interesting, the top 1% of the wealthiest people own $52 trillion of our monies. They own more than 50% of the wealth. Now just think about that for a second. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. Now, who bears the weight of a community? Who keeps a community going? No right or wrong answers, guys. Did you say middle class? Middle class, yes, absolutely. They're the ones that volunteer. They're the ones that typically go to church, okay? And I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes, okay? Church attendance is declining across the nation, okay? And a lot of people have said, well, the communities can do that, i.e. the churches should step in and do that, help fill. Very difficult when the churches are getting smaller. Now, you do have mega churches, you know what I mean? And that's often more for the wealthy, believe it or not, okay? They want to put their name on something, okay? One of the smartest things they've done is churches are reaching out and providing breakfast and food, because we have so much food insecurities that will draw people into the church. And they're doing that for a reason, because that's part of the problem. So middle class pays taxes, okay? And I'm not trying to get political. We can talk about that at break. But if they were to tax the wealthy just a hair differently, okay? Because how much is too much? Do you know what I mean? If you're, see, like trillions, I don't even know if I can count to a trillion. Do you know what I mean? I can kind of get the gist. It used to be if you were a millionaire, you were rich. That is no longer true. Okay, that is no longer true. So how many, without raising hands or anything, think about it, how many of you are multimillionaires? Not very many people, okay? In the middle class, we are using coupons. We are looking for sales. This is what middle class, and they carry the brunt of a community, okay? So this is audience participation time. I promise you there is nothing that will be right or wrong, okay? So if you are in your car or even in this area or wherever you're from and you drive into an area that you know is a poor area, okay? Or, you know, like when you're traveling and you need gas and you get off and you don't even have any idea where you are, okay? So what do you see in those neighborhoods? Okay, guys? A lot of garbage around. See people nodding. What else do you see? Pardon? I don't hear well. I wear hearing aids, so you're going to have to. Lots of liquor stores, yes. And what goes with liquor stores? Pardon? Payday lending. Cash advance stores. Y'all getting it? Okay. What does housing look like? A lot of government housing. Now, I will say government housing is taking a stand and not allowing like dead vehicles and, you know, like appliances and stuff to kind of sit out. But if you're not in that housing, would you agree that you see that a lot? So a lot of trash. What about kids out in a neighborhood? Right, they're out. She said, doesn't matter how old they're out, okay? So let me try to, these are some things I want to, so you see boarded up buildings, you'll see rental properties, you see vacant lots, you see broken street lights, often lighting is not good in a poor neighborhood, broken toys, you see homeless, laundromats. I just had an aha experience helping a nonprofit that their goal is hygiene for the community. And so they're helping provide free laundry services on a Saturday. So I thought, I'll help. This is fun. I haven't done this in a while. And I remember laundromat days from college and, you know, and all, but I am privileged to have a washer and dryer in my home, okay? So I went, and they had this little box, and it had rolls of quarters in it. And there was probably, I don't know, maybe $100 in there, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a lot of quarters. Yeah, she's getting it. One machine, and it was a big machine, took 21 quarters. 21. And the regular machines took 12. I was blown away. I mean, I literally was, so I faked it pretty well, but they knew I didn't know. I didn't even know how to turn the thing on. I put 6 quarters in one and pushed it, and I thought, well, it didn't start. She goes, oh, you got to do 6 more, honey. And I put 6 more in because we had to control using it. We did 240-something loads of wash that day. And they were so appreciative. They just kept on. And then, here and I'm being honest with you, I was sort of flipping out over how expensive the washers were. Oh, honey. Then we got to the dryers. A quarter gave you 3 minutes, and they weren't real hot dryers. And I can tell you, people do not do wash like I do. And I have the privilege of being able to do wash the way I want to do wash, okay? And at any time. If I want to throw a load in at midnight, I, by gosh, can. But there were people lined up waiting, and when I got out of my car with some of the stuff that we needed, they said, are you that lady for free wash? And I said, yes, I am. They said, we'll help you unload your car. We're ready. Every machine was full. They were waiting for us to get there. Okay, just, y'all, what an aha moment for me. I mean, I just had it all day long. Police presence, let's talk about that. What do you think, how do you think police handle themselves when they're in this environment? Think maybe a little on guard? Yeah. So we talked about people out on the streets. Do you think they might see a group of teenagers and go, hey, ho, what are you out here for? It's 10 o'clock at night. Okay, so we're going to get into time. Please don't let me forget time because it's so fascinating. But police are on guard when they're in that area. It is not a nice area. So let's go to the next one. So let's say you're in a middle-class neighborhood, perhaps where many of us live. What do you see? Lawns are mowed, yes. Tend to try to take care, middle class really care about their home, okay? That's very important for them to look a certain way if they can. So yes, well-tended lawns. What else? Yes. Oh, he brings up such a good point. There are grocery stores, there are banks, there are libraries, there are theaters, there are chain restaurants. There's fast food everywhere, but fast food, true fast food, and I'm not knocking it because Lord knows their french fries and Cokes are really good, but Rally's, that is fast food for the poor. Okay, and because Arby's is getting really expensive to eat. Do you know what I mean? So there are some places that truly as restaurants, but for middle class, in a middle class area, getting to go to O'Charlie's or Chili's or Texas Roadhouse is entertainment as well for the middle class. It's like I've worked all the time, so somebody's going to wait on me and I'm going to have me a good steak. And while I'm at it, throw in a margarita. Okay, but that is really entertainment for us. And that is typically not as achievable for the people living in poverty. So let's talk about else. What kind of cars do you see? SUVs, yeah, I don't know who said it, but SUVs is perfect. Often you see 2 cars because you've got 2 people working if they can, okay? So in poor, you don't see that. But ironically, in poor, it is a status for them to have as nice a car as they possibly can have. Now, they may be living in a tent, honey, but they may have a very nice car because that is very important in their relationships, okay? So here are some things. See, coffee shops, okay? One of the best ways to save money is stay out of Starbucks. Okay, or if you've got to get coffee out, McDonald's coffee is very good coffee and it's a whole lot cheaper. Okay, you see big box stores, you see churches, banks. That is so ironic because in banks we develop a relationship. Middle class develops a relationship with a bank. We have a checking, we try to have savings. Often we have like a Christmas club account or a vacation account. I know people use debit cards a lot. You have a relationship. So, and you have the ability with that relationship that should you have needs, you can talk to that bank. So like a loan, or if you need to try to get another car or something like that. The poor don't, okay? They don't have a relationship. It's cash advance, which all of us should know is just raping people, okay? And they don't realize it because that's what's in their neighborhood. Okay, and then when they go in a bank, gosh forbid, because they have no banking experience and they bounce a check, they get penalized like crazy. And they already didn't have money because they wrote a bad check, and now you're giving them a fee of like $50. You're just digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper for them. Okay, so when we start in a little bit talking more about gambling and if money should come in, somebody remind me that we need to talk about banks because it's so critically important. She mentioned well-kept yard. You have walking trails, neighborhood association signs that say that this neighborhood cares about how it looks and we're going to meet about it. Golf courses, grocery stores is super important. In poor circles, you'll see so many convenience stores, and we know that's the most expensive snack food you can buy. But a lot of people, that's all that's there for them. And they talk about in many cities that a lot of people do not have access to good, healthy groceries. And then they say we need more vegetables and fruit, okay, but you got to have them, and they can't look pitiful. I mean, they have to. So they've tried in our area, I don't know if it's everywhere, where people can use the farmer's market, okay, and they can use like WIC vouchers and get some groceries. A lot of them have no idea what to do with it. They've never done this before. I worked with a group of kids and I said, how many of y'all have had pineapple? Everybody in the room raised their hand. I said, okay. So I brought in a pineapple. None of them had had fresh pineapple. They'd had canned pineapple. And there's nothing wrong with canned pineapple. I mean, we all use it. But when I started, they were like, what? What are you doing? Same story, I got some Asian pears. Now, if you don't know what an Asian pear looks like, look kind of like an apple, okay, but it really is a pear. So I brought them in, I told them they were Asian pears, and they're like, Miss Angela, they're apples. And I said, no, seriously, they're Asian pears, I promise you that's what they are because this is how I got them, and So the whole class, they were like, she thinks those are pears, and they're not. They made fun of me, but they had never seen it before. Okay, so food is huge for the people in poverty. We worked at the health department. They wanted to do, this is a true story, guys, wanted to do a brochure for people so that we could pass it out in clinic. And it would help you pick healthy choices when you went to eat. And we had nutritionists and nurses and had a little team together, and I was the nurse. And you can tell I like to eat. Okay, so let's get real. So they talked about, well, why don't we put in there that when you go to Red Lobster for lunch, that you save half of your lunch portion for another meal. Fine, but the folks I took care of don't go to Red Lobster. They wouldn't even think about going in Red Lobster. So you have to be real with what's going on, okay? There's a reason that bologna sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly have kept people alive forever, because a lot of people, that's what they're surviving on. So when you look at some of this, do you agree? Do you all agree? All right, so let's go to the next one. What do you see when you go into wealthy? And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because, that's not really what we're about today. Pardon? Big mansion homes, yes. Pardon? Horse farms. Yeah, no, absolutely, horse farms. We are going to talk about horses in a little bit. Oh, baby. Say it again.
I don't know. I'm not wealthy, so I'm not used to those neighborhoods.
Well, you see like gated, here, let's pull it up. You see historic homes, you see public art a lot of places, gated communities. They have groundskeepers. It's a higher level, like when she put her hands up, big houses. Now, just as a comment, I look at some of these houses that are being built, and Bowling Green's exploding. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all are from Bowling Green, but Bowling Green is exploding. But I think, how do you afford these houses? I just worry about that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So they have mega churches, they have private planes, pedigreed pets, okay? They often won't go to the shelter and get a pet. They want a certain breed. There's nothing wrong with that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. But you do tend to see it more in the wealthy group. Multiple car households, often they have a car just for fun. Or they'll have like an antique car because, it's collectible. They might have motorcycles and jet skis. So they have a lot available to them. So let's talk about the police. Police come in this area. What are they looking?
Make sure nobody's stealing their stuff.
Right. They're looking for people because they're gonna be, but they're not scared in this environment. Okay, because this environment's got their back. There's lights, there's services, there's things in that area. Okay, so in this, to truly understand the circles, you have to understand the mental models. So when I bring some of this up, please don't think I'm trying to say that you don't get it, but there's often the point of where you're just looking at it for me, okay? How does this affect me? What do I need to do? me. That's all I care about right now. But then you also have it where people in their work, maybe a team group does stuff. You all that are getting your higher degrees to get your gambling, which is wonderful, that's a team that you're involved in. So, you look at it where it's not just me and look at what we are going to be able to accomplish, okay? And then you get to the community. So when I moved from working in the hospital setting, I worked ER and critical care, and I absolutely loved it. But when I went to the community health, we started writing grants on breast cancer awareness so that we could see a region and take care of them. Or we were looking at dental issues, who had dental issues. We were looking at a very broad picture of how could our work impact many, okay? So you really have to know where is that person coming from? Because often when we're meeting with somebody, they're only worried about them, okay? That's really the only thing that's got them concerned, or perhaps their loved ones. And we're coming at it from, this is my job, this is what I'm supposed to do, I have 15 minutes to see you, and we gotta get it done, okay? And then often people above us are saying, and as a community aspect, these are some things that we should be working on, and it's tough. Okay, so Dr. James Comer, he's a renowned child psychologist or psychiatrist, and if you can read some of his work, it is just remarkable. But when you read it, you think, we all know that. This is not new stuff, but he is so articulate. But what he says is there is no significant learning without a relationship, okay? So when you think about that, and it can be anybody. It could be anybody in this room. It could be a coach. It can be a friend. It can be a parent, the doctor that's taking care of them, the priest or the minister. It can be coaches, counselors, all of you all. But you have to develop a relationship. So I can tell you, because I am terrible at names, okay? I'm just horrible at names. And I think it's because of my career, how many names have come, I'm just not good at it. I mean, I freely admit. So often when I get somebody's business card, I'll write on it, like tall, and where I met them, because that I can remember. Do you know what I mean? It's funny how, but to the life of me, I can't remember their name. But that does help. So, but anyway, okay. So relationships are so important, and time after time after time, you see it happening. Now, his work predominantly dealt with children living in poor circumstances and how scholastically that affected them. That's really his main focus of work, but he's just remarkable, you guys. Okay, so a lot of people don't really understand the difference between generational poverty and situational poverty, and it's really easy, okay? Situational poverty means something's happened where you're not getting your pay, okay? People are 2 paychecks away from significantly changing their life. Just 2, okay? Now, if you think about that, often people get paid every 2 weeks. So within a month, people can start losing their homes, not be able to pay for their cars. Now, they tell you in all financial stuff, you need to have at least 6 months in savings or held somewhere for all these emergencies. Most of the people in poor don't have it. It's just a pipe dream. It just doesn't happen, okay? So really, generational is when it's been truly generations, like would be my grandmother, my mom, me, when generations have lived in poverty. Now, often, when you see generational poverty, there's stuff that's happened. Usually matriarchal families, so women-headed families. Sometimes it's hard for me to say. And often there has not been a male involved, there's not much education, and there is no skill. So, they don't really have anything that they can, so often they just barter. You see a lot of barter with people that are poor. Okay, but does it matter? Because people really get caught up in all this. Okay, they really do. They go, well, they've been living on welfare for years, and you just want to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. But if somebody's hungry in this day and time, are we not prioritizing wrong? No one should be hungry. No one should be hungry. Okay, so we're going to talk what the slide is, and then we're going to kind of do a lot of digression, if you all will indulge me. So back in 1965, when they started trying to figure out how to do assistance to people, they got this lady who was brilliant, was absolutely supposed to be top-notch, and they said, you figure it out. Help us figure this out. So she said that they would consider 1/3 of the benefits that persons could get would cover food, leaving 2/3 to cover rent, utilities, clothing, entertainment, medical care, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, y'all see a problem? Okay. Problem, huge problem, huge problem. Because what we're seeing now is poverty, people living poor, are often paying 70% of their income just to have a roof over their head. So, okay, think about it. Now, you know, let me show you this slide. Oh, no, wait. I forgot I wanted to tell you something. Okay, if this isn't bad enough, let's briefly talk about health insurance. Just ever so briefly. Okay, so when you look at that, they say it's called hyperinflation. Since COVID, since 2020, healthcare costs have hyperinflated. That means at 188% increase. 188. Now, we're also looking at, they're saying that our insurance rates could go up as much as 9%, which is the highest it's been in 15 years. You know, like since something's happened. 15 years, okay, we're at 9%. Employee contributions where you'll have to do out of pocket, they're saying could be 6 to 7% increase coming out of your pocket. If you start looking at the Affordable Care Act, oh my, okay? Kentucky is hovering around 20%, which I thought was bad, but it is not, okay? And when you look at other places like Arkansas is looking at a 66% increase. Georgia is looking at a 31% increase. Florida is looking at a 32% increase. So then I think, well, Kentucky's numbers aren't too bad. But unfortunately, if you look at the state, like north, south, east, west, south is where the hit is the hardest. The South, big time. We're up here in the 20s and 30s, up to 60s. We're up in the northeast area, they're at like 9%, which 9%, I'm not knocking that, but we are significantly worse. And why do you think that is?
Pre-existing health conditions.
Pardon?
Pre-existing health conditions.
Pre-existing health conditions. Pardon?
Poverty in the South.
Poverty in the South. That's exactly right. We just don't take care of ourselves. You know, a lot of people don't go to the doctor. Only 8.2% there are 8.2% of Kentuckians that do not have health insurance. And we're a 4 million state. So, you know, think about that for a second. Okay, so and I was trying to think, it's like 10%, 20 to 30%, West is like 19%. The South predominantly is going to get crucified with this Affordable Care Act. And we already know if they're already paying this much just to survive, to have a roof over their head, how are they going to afford health care? How are they going to afford food? How are they going to do anything? Okay? Now, I got to do this presentation, I've done it in some degrees many, many times, and a long time ago, probably 10 years ago, somebody said, we were talking about stuff, and they said, what do you think is going to happen? I said, it's going to get worse. And guys, it's worse, okay? And it's going to get worse. So we have to really be cognizant of that because it does affect us as well as our institution, as well as the people that we're serving, okay? So let's do this. We all carry hidden rules that really affect how we do everything, how we meet people, how we get up in the morning, you know, everything that we do. So you have to know your circles, okay? The more we listen, the more we talk, the more we meet new people, the more we learn, you become more open. You become a little bit more receptive to ideas. Just met this charming man here doing a marvelous program out now. Never heard of it, okay? But trust me, when I go home, I'm going to tell people about it, okay? Because it's good. And that's what makes things work and make things get better. Strong relationships begin with mutual respect. I'm going to bring RonSonLyn in. When we first met, we clicked. She said, this is what I do. I said, this is what I do. We'll do it really well, and we did, okay? You need that. You need that respect. How time is valued. So we're going to kind of get back into the circles, and this is really one of the best examples that I can show you in the different circles. So when you look at the circles of poor, how do you think they handle time? She's shaking her head no. They don't, guys. They live in the present. They're trying to get through today, got through today, now I'm going to start tackling tomorrow. No thought about Sunday, okay, well, what we're going to do. It is truly day to day. Truly day to day. Now, how do you think middle class handle it?
Trying to plan everything out.
Pardon? I didn't hear. I am so sorry. Planning, absolutely. The decisions that they make, okay? They are looking at a time schedule. I got to do this at a certain time. I got to do this. They're very much more regimented on what's happening with their time. Now, not to say that they don't over-volunteer or, lose track of time. I don't mean that. But they truly try to keep up. I have a doctor's appointment at this time, and I'm going to make it. I need to get my oil changed in my car, my appointments. We're very much into that, okay? How do you think the wealthy are? Yeah, they really don't care. They look at past traditions, what's kind of expected, what's traditional for them to do, but often they have helpers. I use this example, and I think John Travolta is really an amazing actor. I really do. And several years ago, he was recognized as Father of the Year. And great picture of him. I mean, I was just like, oh, that is so cool. So I thought I'd read the article. Guys, he has a chauffeur, they have a cook, they have a housekeeper, they have a nanny, they have a groundskeeper. All the stuff that most people have to run around and try to figure out how to do, they had, because he's so wealthy, he had somebody that could do that for him. So I thought, well, anybody could be the Father of the Year if you didn't have to worry about putting food on the table and having them in clean clothes and shopping and hauling them around. So I'm not taking away from him. I have friends that are in this situation and they don't realize it. They often don't realize just how lucky they are. A friend of mine has a nanny and two housekeepers. She has one that does like the routine stuff that we do all the time. And then she has one that comes like every other month and they do what she refers to as deep cleaning. Okay, now see, that's like spring cleaning, but it happens quite a bit in her house. And she's all the time telling me, I am just so tired. I am just so tired. And you want to go, bless your heart, because they don't get it. And they really don't understand it, okay? All right, so how are relationships? Oh, let me tell you can I tell you another funny about the libraries? When I worked at the health department, I realized none of our prenatal clients coming in had a relationship with the library. And I go to the library all the time. I love the library. Drug my kids to it, love the library. And at the library, as you all know, there's all kinds of references and resources and videos and all kinds of stuff. So we were like, wow. So I talked to the library, and the library said, okay, great, we'll help you get library cards. They brought a library person. Do you remember this? They brought a library person out as we were going through clinic. We were like just automatically going to sign you up for a library card. And so some of them checked out books. They never brought them back. Okay, due date didn't mean anything to them, okay? Now, it would to us, because we didn't want to pay no fines. So one of the smartest things libraries have done is fine-free, because they really want that clientele to come in, use the resources that are in there, whether it's checking out a sewing machine now or yard equipment that you can check out or all kinds of stuff that the library has besides books, videos. It's amazing what's available. In Owensboro, you can check out musical instruments. Okay, so it's great, Okay, so let's talk about relationships. This is one of my favorite ones. I love the time thing because we see it all the time. When in time, if somebody came up, if you and I were friends and we were kind of poor, living in the same area, and she said, I've had a flat tire, I need help. What do you think I would do? Now we're friends living in the poor circle. Help! It didn't matter if I had a doctor's appointment, a WIC appointment, was supposed to be at work. Didn't matter. She needed my help, okay? So when you talk with poor people, it's all about relationships, truly. If you live near me, if you look like me, you're fine, okay? No problems. Do y'all agree? If you're in my environment, if you're in my circle and you look like me, you're good. You're good. If you know somebody that I know, so it's not a direct link, that works too, because that person's pretty cool because they're in my circle, okay? Now, how do you think middle class, or let's look at poor, they look at familiarity, who's in their circle, who's around them, who looks like them. How do you think middle class do? How do they handle relationships?
Transactional.
Pardon?
Maybe transactional.
Oh, that's a really nice word. They are interested in credentials, okay? And what happens a lot, let me pick on you because I asked you to volunteer. They'll come up and they'll go, hi, what's your name?
Hannah.
Hannah, nice to meet you, Hannah. Now what do you do? We do that real quick because we quickly try to figure out with what they tell us, Did they go to school? Are they, with it? We really quickly sum them up, okay? We do that a lot. Hi, what's your name?
David.
David, where are you from?
I'm from Lexington.
Lexington area, okay. Bing, 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 okay. We do that as a way in middle class to truly identify and figure out where that person is. Now, I'm an implant from the areas that I worked. I was not born in Kentucky, but I am still asked, and guys, I am 65 years old. I am still asked, what high school did you go to? And part of it is they're trying to kind of figure me out. Does that make sense? Middle class is notorious for this, okay? And when you answer, it really starts putting you in the little box, okay? Now, how do you think wealthy do? I put it up. It's introductions, okay? So, Jeremy, right? That's an interesting spelling of Jeremy, too. So I would go, hey, Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm well.
I'm
thanks.
good. Who's that lady over there with the dark glasses? Do you
Man.
know? You don't know? Do you know her?
No.
Okay.
I
well,
mean, I
then-
probably do.
Okay,
I'm
but
sure
what I'm
one
trying to get to
is.
is I would never go straight up to the person if I'm in this circle. I would never go straight up and say, hi, I'm Angela, I would go through somebody else. You try to find somebody that knows them and say, tell me about them. I need to know a little bit about them. And then I'd
wearing
want
glasses.
you to do the introduction. And in real life, he says he doesn't know her, but you would find somebody that did. You'd go, do you know her? You'd keep trying to find, because you would never go straight up and introduce, okay? Which I think is really interesting, and you will see it happen, okay? Okay, clothing and appearance. How do you think the poor handle this? Yeah, exactly right.
I was in that. Like,
Oh!
grew up poor, like, very poverty.
Okay.
I know.
Right. So her comment was they wear what they have. Okay? What their clothing is how they relate to other people. Now, let me pop this up. So clothing is worn for function and as much as identity. Okay? So let me give the example of court. I volunteered for CASA. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. Court Appointed Special Advocates. Absolutely phenomenal program. And we would have girls that were going to have to, young women, that were going to have to go to court. And we'd say, now you need to be at court and we'll be there and da-da-da-da-da. Well, then we never sometimes realize we need to say, well, what are you planning on wearing? Okay? Because for them, dressing up might what we not think would be appropriate at all. Because middle class, if you look back, we very clearly choose what we wear to sort of match the occasion that we're involved in. And we have the ability to do that. Now, we might buy our clothes with coupons, and we are big sale shoppers. Let me tell you, middle class is great at that. And they are also smart at 90 days, same as cash, but they will have it paid off. If you don't, like if you miss that window, then they nail you. Well, a lot of people in poor circle aren't good at time. They don't have a relationship with the bank. They really don't know how to handle it. And they think, if I'm close, it won't matter. And then they get hit with all this interest. But middle class handles that really, really well. But middle class would make sure that if you were going to court, that you looked a certain way. Because we recognized the court system, regardless of how much money anybody makes, is for the wealthy. Was designed by the wealthy, written by the wealthy, controlled by the wealthy. It's all the wealthy. So now, you think about it. Middle class, we sort of can see this is what we need to do. So button-down shirts, chino pants, maybe a jacket, hair clean, not a lot of makeup. I mean, we would be very, very comfortable with how we look, but it would have to be a certain way. It's not the same for the wealthy, okay? Because they often don't even have to go to court for stuff. I can give an example of that. But look how far away it is from somebody way over here in poor. And they often don't even understand the language. Can I give an example as a nurse? Do you all like the examples, or does it? Yeah. So when I was working ER, we coded someone and they died, and we'd worked valiantly hard on them. And so I went out, and I was the one supposed to tell the family, this person had died and all that. So, and I'm hustling around and all that. And I said, he arrested, meaning as a nurse, heart quit beating, he kept breathing. And she said immediately, well, he hadn't done drugs in a long time. She thought I meant police arrested. Okay? So when you start, you have to realize where they're coming from, even in the words that you use and how you deal with them. Now, clothing for the wealthy. I have a great story to tell about this. They are into designer, and they don't really care about, if it's on sale. Middle class is really into sales. So I volunteer for Women's Guild of Owensboro. They do a spring luncheon. It's a lot of fun, you all. You get to see a home, and you get to have chicken salad and all that. Well, we serve it on real plates, okay, which we rent. And then when they're picked up and you're done, then they go behind the curtain and they're scraped off and put back in the containers because we got to get them back, okay? It's not a job a lot of people want, but somebody's got to do it. So one lady had surgery. This is a true story, you all. Had surgery, and she said, could I work in the back? And I was the one planning who worked where. And I said, sure, we'd love you to do that. She came in. Now, I did not realize this, but her tennis shoes were $800 tennis shoes. Now, she's working in the back, scraping plates, and wearing $800 tennis shoes. Now, I did not notice that they were $800 tennis shoes, but she thought nothing of it at all, okay? If middle class even had $800 tennis shoes, they sure ain't wearing them to scrape plates off in the back curtain. But that was her life, so she did not see it as anything different. We had a lady come to talk to a group that was impoverished, and we were trying to help them get established in the community, and the lady that came in was dressed, I don't even know the names of some of the stuff, but she had like Gucci glasses and a Louis Vuitton purse. And, so she comes in and she flops all her stuff down and all her jewelry and finery. And I thought, you've lost them. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth. All they see is wealth. They don't hear anything else. And there's no relationship there to them. So you have to be cognizant of that. Okay, anything you want, we can put in circles. Whoop. So this is what I'm hoping Hannah will help me with. But is there anything that's burning, yearning that you all want to talk about? We're going to get into gambling stuff here in just a little bit. Is there anything, or we want to move on and then we'll come back? Okay. Banks. Yeah, we're going to talk about banks when we get into. Oh, say it again. Funerals. Okay. That is an industry that soon will be in trouble. Okay, a lot of private individual funeral homes are being taken over by big companies, okay? Even in small rural areas, you're starting to see it. The average funeral, and I haven't checked recently, but when I checked back in like 2020, 2021, was a little over $10,000, okay? What you're seeing is the poor are often not doing it. They may have a wake, they may have a party or something at somebody's house or do something. I'm not saying they don't recognize that the person has died, but often they're not doing that, okay?
Or you prepay.
Say it again?
Or you prepay. Yeah, they do prepay now, like you can
Start.
now and have it paid off by the time you die.
Okay.
Yeah, my grandparents did that years ago.
Okay, but just think about that for a second. Okay, just think about that for a second. Yeah, just think about it. So I can tell you, we had bodies when I worked ER that family wouldn't come and claim, and they became basically like wards of the state to take care of. It's a huge issue. There's a lot of money. One of the larger funeral homes that I worked with in public health, we had to worry about, pandemic occurred, if we have a massive amount of people that die, how would we handle it? Because it would totally overwhelm the system really fast. So in working with them, absolutely fabulous. I cannot say enough good stuff about them, but we were saying like, how many funerals do you do, and and all that. And then I had done the math of, I've heard that 10,000. Now some cost more. I mean, that's like the average cost. So that means some are costing a whole lot more. But in 1 year, they made over $4 million. Just by the number of, and then taking my minimal number and doing the math. So probably even more than that. And then they do lose some money because there's some people that never pay. But the thought of starting to, it's just like retirement. They're telling us now we need to start planning for retirement as soon as you graduate or can make any kind of money. But just think about that for a second, okay? So we'll come back to this because this can get fired. We can get fired up over that. Okay, This is the 2025, and I apologize. I looked up the 2026. I thought I changed the slide, and I didn't. But for individuals, it's up $310, and for family of 3, it's up $670. It is supposed to be related to inflation as those numbers go up. All right, Alaska and Hawaii are exclusions because they're so expensive to live there. But there is argument that it costs a whole lot more money to live in California than it does to live in Kentucky. So there is even argument in the United States, should that be changed some? Okay, who's most at risk? Kids. Kids are the most at risk because they can't do anything about it, okay? They didn't choose their parents, so they're in this circumstances. So inflation has eroded child care assistance since 1970s, okay? It's not keeping up. So if you've got your child in daycare, often it's taking a substantial chunk of your check to cover it. So back on relationships, remember what we talked about. If you're in my circle, you live next to me, you look like me, you're good. So as a nurse, we used to be baffled by childcare. How are people doing it? Well, what they're doing is, if you look like me and you live, you'll work. You know her and I know her, so can you watch my kids? Now, middle class doesn't do it that way. Let me tell you. We check out the daycares. We have to know everything about them. We have to know their parents. Where you're going. And when my child, my oldest, when she started going to kindergarten and then would ride the bus over to the daycare, which was less than a mile, you all. There was a line, the first time they were supposed to do it, there was a line of parents behind the bus, all of us watching our kids, making sure they got on, they got off. Okay, poor don't have that luxury, okay? They really, really don't. So when you're concerned about childcare, it's really about if they know them, that works. And that's where sometimes they really don't know them. And things can happen. Same thing in middle class. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but you see the vulnerability there. There is no worry about who their parents are or anything like that. It's, you're in my circle, I need help, you might ask for my help, so we're gonna share. And I need you to help watch my kids. Okay, another thing we're seeing is the people who are head of households in their 30s, their salaries are just slashed. And now with AI, a lot of jobs that were supposed to be secure jobs may be going away because AI may be able to do that. And please know I'm not in any way an expert on that. We are also seeing more female head of households, okay, where it's a single mom trying to raise children. And if you don't have a village, and you may have to create a village if you don't have family, but you are seeing more grandparents taking care of children. You're starting to see more people live together again, where it used to be we spread out. Mom may live in Owensboro, but then kids are in New York, and somebody else is in California, and but you're starting to see people come back together because of expense, because of cost, okay? You're seeing more divorce and less marriages, okay? Now, I don't know why necessarily you're not seeing many marriages, but it seems like the younger generation that I have dealt with, which is, my limited circle, they're okay living together. That's totally fine. Now, I can understand if you're real old and you want to live with somebody because you don't want to mess up any of your benefits and stuff. I have no problem with that. But I do think the young don't see marriage. Pardon?
It's the same reason you're married.
Yes.
You lose your health care if your wife's on Medicaid.
So I think you're going to keep seeing this. I think, you're going to.
Yeah, we can't afford to get married.
Yeah. Well, and okay, weddings, they have proven, and I have trouble saying this, but the higher your wedding costs are, the shorter your marriage. So seriously, there's a very wealthy family in Owensboro, Kentucky. They spent $150-something thousand on their daughter's wedding. Now, it wasn't the biggest wedding in Owensboro by any, but that's a lot of money, you all. 6 months. Lasted 6 months. And that money was just gone. So people really have kind of lost their mind. And as a person going to a wedding, now people are expecting a meal and an open bar, and it's just like, okay, when I got married, we went in the basement and had punch and cake. So it's just not the same anymore. But I do think marriage is in trouble, I don't, and there's something about having a partner and having that commitment. I'm married, so let me, and I'm happily married. So, I look at it as totally different. I want that for people. When I got sick, I could not have gotten through all my care without my husband, okay? And honestly, in that poor circle, you might be the best friend, okay? And you might really have needs, but then if something else affects that person, they're going to drop you, honey, okay? And I don't mean that bad. When people come in the housing project, you're assigned a certain number of people that can live in that house. And if you let somebody come and stay on your couch or floor or whatever, which a lot of people do, it can jeopardize your housing. So, really, it's so tough. It is so tough. Okay, so there's 3 principles of poverty. Basically, it boils down, if you're living in poverty, you have stressors that many other people don't recognize, okay? And that stress does affect your health and your mental health, your physical health. It affects you, whether you think it does or not. If you're worried every day about where am I going to eat, or am I going to be able to pay the rent, or it's like seeing the bear, all the time. Your adrenaline is cooking, okay? What poverty looks like with a degree. A lot of college graduates not only have college debt, they can't get a job of what they want, okay? And as I say here, 3.6 million college graduates live below the poverty line. Representation is out of reach. Now, I tried to find this because I hear it on the news, but it used to say that if you wanted to run for Congress, it cost basically $6 million. I bet you now we're pumping a whole lot more money into people's campaigns. And again, not trying to be, but it looks like the Democrats have got, the Republicans have got lots of money to put in that. And I would so love them to say, give $10 million that you're putting in whoever's campaign, and let's feed people, or let's help housing, or let's do something, okay? So we've really kind of got out of that. In all the organizations that I've sat on boards with, if you're attached nationally to a group, they always say, we want you to have better representation of your community. Well, it is very hard to get poor people to sit at the table. They can't come to the meetings. They can't eat where you go if you meet at a restaurant, and often the other people don't even think about stuff like that. There are childcare issues. There's so many reasons that keep them from the table. Plus, they don't want to be the token. Do you know what I mean? They may not feel that they're really respected on here. You just want me on here because, and I mean this in all due respect, because the community I live in is such a small percent of African Americans, they really resent it. When you sometimes say, will you please serve on our board? Not seeing it as a compliment is, oh, you want that to be able to check that off. Okay. Poverty impacts, the biggest issue related to neglect is poverty, where kids don't have what they need for like school clothes, lice treatment, food. School nurses keep snacks and stuff in their offices because a lot of kids are hungry. And schools do a great job feeding children, great job. You worry about when schools are closed. How are the kids eating? Schools are doing backpack programs. So the schools are invaluable for feeding some of our children. But often they're truant because they don't have anybody to really time. One guidance counselor gives out alarm clocks. Okay, and I think that's kind of brilliant. One, you don't see them as often, but she teaches them how to set the alarm, and put it in your room or wherever you're sleeping, because a lot of them don't have bedrooms. They're on the floor or couch or something like that. Okay, education. Oh, many families are just 2 paychecks away. I really want you to stop and think about it. Now, I know I've wanted my check, like I can't wait till we get paid, I got to do something. But typically, 2 checks away, you're thinking about where am I going to be living, what are they going to do? And when you add gambling in it and all that, which we're going to get into some of those slides, it makes it even worse. Okay, so let's talk about Kentucky briefly. Housing, we're supposed to be 47% lower than the national average. Groceries, we're supposed to be about 39% cheaper than the national average. But, again, that's putting up against New York and, California. Every time I go to the grocery store, I see stuff going up, okay? We're ranked number 10 in affordability, according to the U.S. News, 14 in cost of living, ranked 39 as the best overall state. That's Kentucky. Okay, so I looked up some stuff. I thought this was kind of interesting. In Owensboro, there's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's $1,250 a month. Bowling Green, it's a house, And I didn't pick like gargantuan, it's 1,700 square feet. I mean, that's a nice size house. I'm not, but I didn't pick one of those like, like that kind of house. And that's 270,000. 3-bedroom, 1-bath over here is $1,350 a month. Scottsville, which is a booming area in this area, 2,200 square foot house, $350,000. I mean, that's a lot, I think. Okay, so pause for just a second to think: is food, hygiene, housing, being able to get somewhere, water, is that a right? Shouldn't everybody have that? Okay, now let's talk about bottled water. Bottled water is the most expensive water out there, okay? Bar none, bottled water. But how many people use bottled water? It's crazy. Who would have thought, 10 years ago or so, that if I put some water, people are going to buy it, and people buy it like crazy. It's a billions and billions dollar industry. When people lose water, like in Flint, Michigan, they were expected to be able to buy water, and they really couldn't, and there really wasn't even enough for everybody. So water is really expensive. When a water plant comes in, like Dasani or really any of them, they get all kinds of tax benefits and incentives to come into the area, but it doesn't make the water cheaper when you're buying it, okay? Bottled water is super expensive. That's why when you see like containers like you guys have got, those are brilliant because you can refill those up. And there's nothing wrong with tap water. A very good friend of mine that is wealthy, they only do bottled water, except for their child they just adopted. And what she'll tell me is, Miss Angela is what she calls me. She goes, Miss Angela, I drink tap water. Because see, that's all she's ever known. Do you know what I mean? But the new family she's just gotten adopted into, they don't. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Okay, so let's talk about Kentucky. It's a commonwealth. There's 3 other places, Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Virginia. Okay, so yeah, we're all commonwealths, and that was after the Revolutionary War. If you said you were a commonwealth, it said you were for the people and by the people and would help the people and all. We're 83 to, you probably want me to stop moving around, 83 to 87% white. Okay, we're, and depends on statistics, 7 to 9% black, and then less than 10% of other. Okay, but that number is increasing and has increased steadily. We have about 6.4% of our Commonwealth is non-English speaking, okay? And of that, it's a lot more difficult here in Bowling Green, but in Owensboro, a lot of that is Spanish, okay? Okay, let's see what else. There's over 235 veterans, 235,000 veterans. There are 16 million across the United States. And the reason I bring veterans up, and you all are so much more knowledgeable about gambling than I will ever be, but veterans are an at-risk group, okay, for getting into gambling. So when you see that we've got 235,000, that's a lot of folks that could be at risk, okay? So I apologize. All I want for you visual people is see color. That's all I need you to do, okay? So poverty rates in Kentucky vary, but where they're darker, can you kind of see the darker colors? That's the worst area of poverty. So it's across Kentucky, but very much concentrated in this area here, okay? 42% of that population is rural, where on average a community is about 25% rural. So we're way more rural in that area. So then persistent poverty, which means back to that kind of generational, this has been going on for a long time. Again, color only. I'm not trying to bore you with the slides, but see where all the color is. Okay? This is definitely the poorest area in Kentucky. Not to say that there aren't poor other areas. You saw that with the color, but big time concentration there. Okay, we just did that one. Why are you not moving? Well, why? What is that? Hang on, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Help!
Battery's dead.
Oh.
Hang on 1 second.
Okay, battery's dead. I'm doing a sip of coffee. Do you need that one over there, or?
Yes. I thought I had a second one.
So just, Can you guys see that decently enough to pick up color well enough? Okay, because that's all I really want you to see. Oh, yay. All right, thank you. Being poor affects your health, okay? And with the cost of medicines increasing rapidly and common medicines, like Lasix and digoxin being harder to find, this is a huge problem in Kentucky, all right? So when you look at the colors again, you see it everywhere. Okay, I'm not by any, I know the color's not great. I thought it'd be a little bit darker. But you see again in Kentucky, the Appalachian area, Appalachia, I say it wrong every time, but that area is the poorest area in Kentucky, notedly, okay? When you look at tax bases, if the area is poor, the schools are in trouble because they're not getting the money. And again, look, you see it everywhere. I'm not saying it's not, but it is very heavily concentrated in the far eastern part of our state. Okay, again, it's everywhere. So there's all this issue about trying to help private schools and all that. We need to be helping public education. We need to recognize teachers for what they're doing. We need, in my opinion, we need to recognize that institution because they're holding our children for years and trying to help mold them. We need to recognize that excellence that they often provide. So when we talk about Appalachia, it's a 2,000 miles area, 12 states are involved, all of West Virginia, and then you can see here, so it's 54 counties in Kentucky. We have 120 counties, so a good percent of our counties are in Appalachia. Now, biggest growth areas right now, this county we're sitting in right now, this area, it's huge growth. Scottsville, huge, exploding growth. And they do think a lot of that is because of the proximity to I-65, the transportation routes. You can get into any big municipality, another city very quickly. So a lot of growth here, they do truly relate to I-65. So Appalachia Proud, are y'all familiar with that? There's a lot of artisans in that area, and you still see old techniques of smithing and basket weaving and quilting and dulcimers being made and all that. So they're really trying to promote that to help bring money into the community because these areas are so poor. It's kind of like Kentucky Proud, but specifically for those counties. Okay, poverty in relationship to gambling. For many families, gambling isn't entertainment, it's hope. Now, how I look at gambling is it's a seduction. They seduce you, okay? They offer free money. They say, we've got entertainment. We've got food. We've got hotels. Come one, come all. And we should know, in middle class, ain't nothing free, okay? And when you walk into these beautiful establishments, the house wins, okay? The house wins. But they are being seduced. And they go after the young. They go after veterans. They go after the uneducated. They go after the people in disadvantaged areas. Look at what's happened with the Native American Indians. And it's interesting to me, in Kentucky, if you're looking at tourism stuff, just about anywhere you plot to look at, they tell you how close you are to a casino. So you think about that. We are promoting this constantly. There are over 10,000 electronic gaming devices in Kentucky. There are 78 different lottery tickets, okay? And lottery, which helps fund education, is not used nearly as much. 4 times more is going into these electronic betting systems and sports betting than lottery. So when we look at where do we get our bang, we ain't getting it from the electronic gaming devices, guys, and sports betting. That's not where money's coming in. We're getting it from the lottery. So that was really shocking to me. But I'm going to talk about this guy. Do y'all know who this is? Okay. David Bromstad, if I'm saying it right. He's 52 years old, super outrageous. He's an interior decorator, an artist. He went to Ringling Art School, wanted to be a Disney animator, got a job at Disney and hated it because as an animator, you're doing one picture and they move this way, and then you do another picture and they move this way, and he needed something with more stimulus. He got into HGTV. He won Design Star. He has a tattoo addiction, okay, and he freely admits it. His first tattoo was a dragonfly because that was his design company. I find him fascinating. But what he does is he takes people that have won the lottery that look like all of us, look just like us, and they often get a new home. And he says that he grew up poor. He came from a very small town. I do think they had a stoplight. I think there was 2,000 people. I mean, so he grew up very poor, not known, but then look where he's come. He gets $70,000 an episode. He's worth between $2 to $4 million, it depends on what you look at, and has a wild following, okay? But he says the reason he can relate to people is that he was poor at one time. So when they come to him, he says he tries to say, don't be buying one of these bongo houses. He tries to find out, what do you really need? What would make you happy? What would bring you joy? Now, I've seen some, it's just like any realtor. They show you, kind of in your price range, and then they show you that house that's a little bit outside your price range, and doesn't it just, it's just perfect. But now he still does that because he's working with realtors, okay? And it's a show. I did try to find out if it's fake, but I couldn't find that out. Okay, so let's talk about lottery for a second. 70, in some data, says 70%. The lowest I saw was 30%, but I'm going to stay with 70. The people that win the lottery go bankrupt because they don't know how to manage that money. They do not have a relationship with the bank, and what they tell you is if you win the lottery, the first thing you should do is talk to your financial advisor. Okay, now probably some people in here have financial advisors, but do you think anybody in the poor circle has a financial advisor? No, so they don't know what to do, and remember, it's about relationships. They find out you have money, okay, you've got money. When it gets announced, then suddenly you come up and you go, hey, you know me, I need some tires. Hey, you know me, my kid's hungry, I need some money. A lot of people start coming out of the woodwork to get a piece of that money. And because relationships are so important, often they help. They think, I've got it, I can help, okay? But 70% often, because they say, have a relationship or talk to your financial advisor, and many people have no idea. And I don't think the state says, oh, hey, you just got this walloping amount of money, let me help you. They just take your picture and advertise it like crazy because they want that seduction to keep occurring. Why couldn't that be me? Why couldn't I have gotten that ticket? And you all probably heard, I don't know if it's an urban legend, but the lady who, they did a gift exchange at their work, and she put a lottery ticket in, and the woman won like, $100,000 or something crazy. And then that lady was like, well, I want part of it. And the other lady was like, oh, hey, no, that was my gift. So you think, how would you handle that? What would be the right thing to do? But I find him fascinating. Does anybody watch him? Isn't he kind of wild? I mean, now my husband hates him, okay? He'll go, turn that off, okay? So my husband doesn't like him at all, but I do think he's kind of interesting. So why it appeals is they hope for quick financial change. They want to live the good life. They want to escape financial stress, okay? They think this is a way to do it. It's ubiquitous. I love that word. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. About every convenience store you can buy a lottery ticket. It's on the news. They do commercials. They basically shove it down our throats, okay? So it's here. Target marketing. I mean, they're going after young kids with sports betting, and let me just, I am not necessarily a fan of this gentleman. He's highly conservative. His name is Cal Thomas. Been a syndicated columnist for over 50 years. He even came out with an article that said, we have entered a new uncontrolled vice that we do not have a handle on how to help. That's why all of y'all are in here. That's why y'all are working for that higher education. That's why this group is trying to get the word out. It is a huge problem. I talked to you about vets. There's targeting certain people. Men are 2 times more likely to gamble than women. So a lot of the machoism, the testosterone in some of these ads, it's to appeal to the guys, Okay, not to say that women don't, I don't mean that, but they are more at risk, okay? So we know this, financial, social, mental health, it's all kinds of issues. The people that have access to funds that they think they can use and then win and put back and have a shortfall. Or the person who lost their job but thinks, I can do it. Or they think they've got a secret, they've got a strategy, and I've got to hit it. Or the fallacy of hit heads 5 times in a row, what's going to happen on that 6th one, you know? And it's seductive, guys. It really gets in there, just like drugs and alcohol and everything else. They crave it, they want it. The body is pumping dopamine and pumping adrenaline, and you get to do that risk-taking, and it's a fever. It does not stop. So I applaud you for what you're trying to do. I got to go to Vegas recently to see Wizard of Oz at the Sphere. That's like my favoriteest movie ever, and that was something for me. But obviously you had to go through all the gambling things. You don't do slots anymore. You don't put money in and pull a thing. You still pull the thing, but you have to get a credit card, or it's like a credit card. You go check in, they want to know everything about you. I mean, everything. They take your picture, they want to see your credit card, and then you load so much money on it, and then you go play with that. Well, you know, just think about that. They're tracking you. They're tracking everything about you. Okay, so in some of the stuff, and they're trying to look at how can we help gamblers that are in trouble. So let's see what the solution is. Okay, I love this. Big study done. Big study. Can't imagine how much money. Gambling makes poor people poor and exacerbates existing poverty. Now, they did a study on that. They did a study to say that. This to me was a duh-wee moment, okay? If you're wealthy and you lose $100, no big deal. When you look at borrowing money, okay, poor often barter. When I went and gave WIC out in the communities for moms that had just had babies, they would barter that formula sometimes. We knew they were doing it. Some of the foods they would get, a lot of bartering goes on. I can give you a haircut, then what can you do for me? A lot of that's gone on, okay? I've lost my train of thought. I am so sorry. I have totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I don't remember what I was going to tell you. But I'm sorry. That doesn't happen to me. Okay. The only reason I bring this up is in color, is all I want you to see, is the orange lines and then the blue lines. Can you all see those? Okay. So the lottery payments to the state, this is what we're getting, the orange line. The blue boxes are what we're getting from the electronic betting, the casinos. We're getting a very small portion. So when I saw that, the only reason I put it up there is I love a visual. You can kind of see. And remember, 4 times more people are doing the blue than they're doing the orange.
But sorry.
Go ahead. No.
But which circle? Like who?
Okay. His question was which circle. Gambling's in all circles, okay? So don't think it, but in the poor circle, remember it exacerbates. They say that, okay, let me make sure I say this correct. If you bet within 3 years of your first bet, whatever it is, it will be 8 times higher than what you initially started with. So like if you start with $1 and you keep betting, in 3 years, you're going to be betting $8. Does that make sense? You keep increasing, okay? The poorest 1% in zip codes, on average, spend $600 a year in lottery tickets. Now, you got to remember, lottery tickets. And we get revenue, good revenue, from the lottery tickets that helps with education, but we don't get it. So if they're spending that much, remember, on average, 4 times more money is spent in electronic betting than it is in lottery tickets. That's significant, okay? So now, and I know this one's kind of hard to see, but this is when more than half of the revenue collected from the slots returns to the industry. So in Kentucky's wisdom, and we're one of the lowest percentage states across the United States, when they said, we're going to have betting and we're going to do all this, because betting was around before Kentucky was even formed as a commonwealth or a state, okay? And then we had Churchill Downs, and I think it was 1883 was developed, so we've had horse racing going on for a long time. So then they say, we're gonna work on this and see what we can do. Well, they bring half the horse industry in. So whose back do you think they were worried about? So a bulk of the money goes back to the thoroughbred industry and not to the state. Okay? We are one of the lowest. So this money, at this thing, it was $75 million. That sounds like a lot of money, but you're talking about 120 counties across Kentucky. It's not really that much money. We could get a whole lot more, and that $75 million is supposed to cover your assistance programs, the administrative fees, pension for the people working. So really, when you start whacking that away, that's really not that much money. So one of the things, and I have this on one of the last slides, is to say, we need to work on this. We need to legislate for there being more money. We need the thoroughbred industry. That brings in lots of money to the Commonwealth. Some of the top stuff for us besides thoroughbred is bourbon, which is a big issue right now with the tariffs, okay? We're also a good automotive state or automotive supplier state, and then transportation, because we're so close to, we got UPS, and we got everything, we've got really big hubs here, Amazon Prime, we've got warehouses, so we're really known for that, okay? So when you look at this, you think, but they could give more money. You're from Lexington. I mean, I've seen some of those horse farms where the barns truly are nicer than my home. And I love my home. I'm happy with it, but do you know what I mean? Again, you want to say, when's enough? Okay? Because the wealthy often only give money if they can have their name on something, or it's going to be a legacy, or it's going to get their kid into the school that they want to. Middle class carries the burden of keeping a community going. And remember, it's getting stretched thinner. You're being asked everywhere for money and donations. It's just exploded because so many people are trying to help. But you don't get the donations like that from the wealthy. And they have the money, okay? They've got the money. Okay, so what can we do? Build relationships grounded in mutual respect. That is in anything you do, okay? Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Be nice to them. At the health department, I used to have to preach to people, thank you for coming in. I'm glad you're here. And I had to argue. If you were late, they'd say, not going to let them see. No, they got here. We are going to see them. Now, was that popular? No, okay? But it changed. When I took over prenatal clinic, we had a 36% no-show rate. It's staggering. With the work we did, we got it down to less than 3. Okay? You have to treat people like people. You got to understand where they're coming from. We did a no smoking campaign, and in all the literature it said, got to get them to quit, got to get them to quit. And I know you're sitting here and I just keep picking on you, but we'd say, any you can cut back, we're going to applaud. We're going to applaud. You cut back a half a pack, oh, honey, that is wonderful, because it might be very hard for you to quit. And that may be a goal that you can't achieve. So you have to work with people. You have to understand where they're coming from and recognize those positive steps. Now that same no smoking program recognizes any cutback. But when I did it, we got a lot of flack. You've got to get them to quit. They've got to quit. And I kept arguing, if I can get them to cut back, I'm happy with that. That helps that baby. You have to, pardon?
Harm reduction is much more effective.
Yes. Okay, understand person's life circumstances before making assumptions. And that, oh gosh, I see this all the time. Now, it just happened on the news, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. Adam Sandler, the actor, do y'all know who I'm talking about? Nods, thank you. His daughter went into like a real high-end purse store. Like I've never been in one of these purse stores, but apparently bags are thousands of dollars. Well, she had on like, bummy clothes, because, kids often don't dress up anymore. They look like they just got out of bed. Yeah. So they were really rude to her. It's kind of like Pretty Woman. Do y'all remember Pretty Woman? Okay. So she tells her daddy, well, then he comes in his, SUV with his Secret Service people and comes in and buys every purse in the store and basically says, F you. to them, because they judged her, We do it all the time. Middle class is horrible about it. Because we're looking at your clothes, we're looking at your shoes, we're looking at your purse, what kind of car you drive, because that helps us kind of know where we are in relationship with you, okay? Kind of makes sense? All right. Offer holistic, well, what happened here? There it goes. I don't know how to do this, but and I am not the experts that you all are, I'm so not. But when I started researching this, now my phone is besieged with sports betting and gambling. My computer, that's what all the ads are. It's all related to gambling now, which is like, wow. But really, the funding that you all need for assistance, because they say in Kentucky, at least 8% currently are at risk of gambling addictions. 8%. Now remember, we're 4 million, so that gets you some good math there. And they're thinking it's going to explode because more and more betting is going on. There's betting like, who do you think in the next 5 minutes is going to need to go to the bathroom? I mean, there's bets on stupid stuff like that. I mean, it's not just, picking something big to win or hitting the lottery. It's all kinds of stuff they're doing, and people are buying into it. And because we have a phone, that's sort of like a toilet now, okay? Know what I mean that? It used to be that people, okay, remember? There was outhouses and stuff like that. And then we got indoor plumbing, and then everybody got indoor plumbing. And then we started getting 2 and 3 bathrooms or powder rooms and all that kind of stuff. Well, it used to be the same thing with cell phones. Nobody had cell phones. And when they got a cell phone, it was the rich and now everybody has a cell phone, okay? But there is so much power in that cell phone, and a lot of betting can be done right there. And it's with them all the time. Okay, now, you saw me look because I thought I had my phone with me. I purposely left my phone in the car, okay, because I figured about 5 minutes into me talking, somebody'd call, or I'd get a spam call, or, something crazy would happen. Okay. But you can't blame people for having a cell phone. And I hear that a lot. I'll say, well, they got a cell phone. Everybody has a cell phone.
It's a public need at this point.
It is, because it's going to get worse too. You can pay for everything, you can do everything on your cell phone. But just know there is so much seduction in that device that a lot of people don't even know how to use it correctly, okay? And offer holistic methods of treatment. As a nurse, I can tell you in my 40 plus years as a nurse, a lot of things. Used to be, nurses couldn't talk about anything mental health. That was all left up to y'all. We couldn't talk about anything with teeth because we took the teeth out of the mouth and dentist only, okay? It doesn't work that way. All of it comes together. That's why I'm convinced when RonSonLyn and I did that program, we just acted like this is the way it works. You're going to see me, and then you're going to see her, and then you're going to see the doctor, and this is how it worked. We did great work because they weren't threatened. They were being treated just like everybody else. And we just did some remarkable work. I mean, I get good. Now, we don't do prenatal clinic because our clinic got so good, the numbers got so good, the doctors in our community said, we'll just take it. We'll take it over. We got it, okay? So do you follow what I'm saying? Because it was money. There was money with this. Okay, so we've got very few minutes, but I want to tell you, I'm a library fan. There are all kinds of books in the library that talk about poverty. There's all kinds of things that can absolutely cause you aha moments. Poverty by America is an excellent book, $2 a day living on almost nothing. I mean, powerful books, and people are doing this. They're surviving with this. I cannot say enough about going to the library and using some of these resources. Now, we've got, 2 minutes maybe or something? About 10, did you say? Okay, cool. All right. So, I mean, and the rest for this is, I say this all the time. We have to stay positive. In all the muck and mire, we have to stay positive. Your circle can be your circle. So I can tell you, a lot of times I turn the news off. I'm tired of hearing it. I turn the radio off and just have quiet in the car. But I do tell everybody, and I've been saying this for years, just keep smiling. There's good out there. There is so much good going on in the world. We don't hear about that. It's just like at work. By gosh, you do something wrong, they're on you. But they don't tell you the 99 other times that you did excellent stuff. Often we forget to do that. But we should say thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me come and do this. I absolutely love it. And it has changed my life. Okay? From when I worked in ER and met people that couldn't sign their names. I'd never experienced that before. So, it really can every day affect you. So what do y'all want to put in circles? Do you all have something you want to put in circles? Somebody talked about funeral homes. We kind of touched on that. Yes, ma'am.
I was thinking about when you mentioned the phones, that AI, we're going to start seeing some differentiation between people that can afford information, and with prediction markets going to take over gambling pretty soon, that we're going to have kind of a strategic advantage if we have access to information by having the upgraded AI plans.
Well, okay, and that, expert, but from stuff I read, there's a fallacy with that.
Correct.
That even if the AI says, bet on, 10 red, it's not going to happen. But I think that phone is going to make it worse. And I think we're going to start seeing, it's not the wealthy we have to worry about. It's these people in the margins that we have to worry about.
They're going to think they have an edge, and so
Right.
they're going to be like on there using this like skill-based kind of
That they really don't have. And the only thing I can say is we've got to keep emphasizing the house wins. The house wins. Bankruptcy rates, it's 25 to 35% more in the people in poverty. Auto loan failures is like 5% once they've started gambling because they don't have the money. And I can tell you in the health department, big problem for us is when we worked at the health department and then I was involved in CASA, some children would get removed from a home, okay? But we were still working with the mom, or the mother of the baby, trying to see what was going to happen. And they sometimes would come in with a new tattoo or a tongue piercing. And I can tell you my own, when they don't talk to me like that because they just gotten a new, I'm like, wait, whoa, hey, that cost you $75 to $100. You could have used that money more wisely. That's a teaching moment, okay? Now, they're in the me, my mode, because that's really all they're thinking about. But we've got to kind of move them toward, you're really involved now with this institutional thing and how it's going to affect the community, if your child gets taken from you. Because sometimes they just don't see it that way. They just say, well, everybody else had the tongue ring. And I'm not lying. When she came to me, I just about lost my mind, you all. So I realized that, and you can have a tongue ring I don't care. That's not the issue. But what is your priorities? And where are their role models? If you remember what the circle looked like when poor, it was not pretty, convenience stores, loan sharks everywhere, it's not good lighting, trash everywhere, people out and all that. Who's the role model in there? Often, I hate to tell you this, it's the drug dealer or somebody like that that's got the really nice car and a wad of cash. Well, that's who they want to be. That's what they want. They want that wealth. And often kids get suckered into stuff because, as RonSonLyn said in her introduction, their brains aren't even developed yet. And we're giving them awesome responsibilities. And we're giving them a phone that can do anything. So my son works for Vanderbilt, the hospital, and does IT stuff. Now, he isn't the person you call for help. He does programming and all that kind of stuff. And he says AI is going to change everything. But I don't know enough about AI to really address it. It scares me. And I saw, it was on a show or news or maybe CBS Sunday Morning, which is my favorite show on TV. They had a girl made by AI as an actress. And she was beautiful. She was beautiful, every guy's dream, of how she looked and all. But she wasn't real. But she looked real and she acted real. And we know, if you're on Facebook, a lot of the stuff there is garbage. For lack of a better term, people have created. So I don't know where it's going, but I don't see it as good. I don't. Okay.
With that AI programming for online gambling, it's going to be synonymous with the way we look at horse racing handicapped.
Yes.
We want to go to the wizard, you know, we want to go to somebody who's going to have good odds of telling me who's going to win the next race. And, you know, you have to pay for that service.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't get it right all the time, and so now you're stuck. Oh, this is what somebody told me, right? So when you look at the service, people who are looking to find the edge, find the end, find the way I can win this thing, that's gonna really be more popular.
People often think if they're involved in something, they know a whole lot about it, and they really don't. You know, I can. I did everything like you were supposed to. Great. I got out first year. It was astonishing how little I knew. You know, I mean, it was just mind-boggling. But a lot of people, when they get caught in that, drug users think they know all the stuff about drugs. I guess it's the same thing with gambling. They think they know how to place a bet or how to wager a bet, when to wager it. You know, and I am not knowledgeable about gambling. I've learned a lot, but I'm not knowledgeable of that. But I think you're right. I think AI is something we really need to watch what's going to happen.
Yeah, I know people that actually use AI to do, like, say, what's the numbers, Powerball, like, what's the, yeah, all the time, like,
I love the commercial. I haven't seen it in a long time where the guys, like, they announce the numbers. He's dancing around the house because it's the numbers they always play. And then the whoever on the side didn't buy the ticket, you know, and, you know, he comes in, he goes, we won. She was like, oh, I didn't buy the ticket. Because a lot of people think, well, if I keep doing this, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, okay? But a lot of people get caught up into that. Okay, they're telling me my time's up. I cannot thank you all enough. This has been wonderful. I think you get a break.
I'm going to use your microphone, so I'll stand real close
Okay.
to you. How's that? Are we okay where we're standing? Okay.
Yeah, he
I
said-
want to thank you for your time and your effort, and glad you learned some stuff about gambling.
Yes, I
'cause
did.
It's real unique. And if you notice the title of our conference, it's a cultural perspective. So I thought Angela would be a great person to lead us off. I've even gotten text while you've been up here. I like this lady.
Good.
And
makes me happy.
she is a great person to get us started on a good note.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
This is from the council, a little extra.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love goodies.
Back at 10:15.
Cool. Thank you.
our conversations and be seated. We were having a hot dog conversation. We'll talk about it later. All right. There'll be a pop quiz. Don't worry about it. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So my name is Jeremy Keiffer. Before we get to introductions for Dr. Miller and myself, a couple housekeeping acknowledgments. After our presentation, something to look forward to is lunch. We will have a brief 15-minute break at 11:45 for us to transition to the room right over here. That's where we're going to have our luncheon and awards. For those of you attending online, if you want to participate in the live chat, scroll down and you'll see a button that says live chat and open side panel. Go ahead and click that and you can access the chat. In order for you to get credit for this presentation, because I cannot see you online, please make sure you sign in, writing your name in there so you can get your CEUs. Now, that being said, again, good morning. Great, that's the most interaction I'm probably gonna get. My name is Jeremy Keiffer. I am a certified social worker and a master's of social work. I am a board member with the Kentucky Council on Problem Gambling, director of community health evaluations with River Valley Behavioral Health, an adjunct professor with Brescia University for their Masters of Social Work program, and proudly a mental health consultant with Project Ricochet, who we will have two wonderful presenters later this afternoon for. Today, what we are going to be talking about is how we can look at beyond the concept of problem gambling and the issues of definitional ambiguity with how that relates. And I'll let Dr. Miller go ahead and introduce himself and start from there.
Hello, my name is Dr. Miller. I'm actually coming from the University of Indianapolis, where I direct our Masters of Social Work program. Jeremy and I have been friends for a long time, since college. We both went to Kentucky Wesleyan together. I grew up in a small town called Barville, which I had to kind of relearn to call Barberville when I left, right? So, but you got to put the gravel in your mouth, say Barville. So I grew up in the Appalachian side of the state. Actually lived in multiple places, lived in around Covington area for a little while as well. I am just tremendously happy to be here, to be with friends, to be with colleagues, and to talk about my home state. I have my doctorate in social work, where I studied very specifically social epidemiology, just a very fancy way of saying trying to understand the breadth and depth of how certain diseases spread from a perspective that you and I care about, from a social aspect. And so Jeremy and I, we spent the last several months studying gambling from that perspective. And so what we are trying to do today is ultimately go through and start with the very core concepts of what is gambling disorder, how do we diagnose it, how do we find it, how do we understand this from a clinical perspective. But then we're going to start moving into a broader space where we're looking at what are the demographics. And then this is when we're going to start putting on our social scientists' hats today, right? We're going to be looking at what are the risk factors, what are the protective factors, what are the social structures that we navigate, and how the problem of gambling exists, right? So then we'll move into a very clear public health framing, and then we'll talk about what does this look like within the U.S. and in Kentucky. And then we're not going to leave you high and dry with just the theoretical frameworks and the conceptual mapping, which we'll spend a considerable amount of time doing, but we'll actually start to get down to what does that mean for prevention, intervention, what do we need to do in terms of policy, how do we need to engineer our clinical work and our practical work. So we're going to be going from the very top of the funnel to the very bottom of the funnel. So I know sometimes there's many thinkers that like to start with the very concrete, and we're going to try to do both, right? We're going to be shifting from the very concrete to the very abstract. We're going to be weaving these concepts together in a way that creates a holistic way that we can understand this problem.
And speaking of the problem, in order for that to be effective, we actually need to start with a definition. And that's where one of the problems we first encounter with gambling use disorders comes up, because we don't have a very good set definition. If we look at a gambling disorder versus a pathological gambler, those are not necessarily the same thing according to clinical studies. For the DSM-5, they define that as a persistent and recurrent problematic gambling behavior leading to clinically significant impairment or distress. ICD-11 categorizes it also as an addictive behavior, right? But it is also pathological. When we're looking at the concept, there is that compulsion. So the continuous inability of an individual to abstain from gambling activities despite those adverse consequences. So what the literature uses when they're talking about a pathological gambler creates this overarching term to describe this as a problem, right? Now we run into the issue. The diagnosis versus the clinical reality. DSM-5 looks at least 4 of these 9 criteria within 12 months, right? But we also have to consider these co-occurring patterns of problematic behavior to properly anticipate it. We have to see these problems with gambling as well as that co-occurrence with mood and anxiety. In many cases, individuals are engaging in this behavior as a way to manage mood issues or anxiety, right? We get that dopamine rush. Then we see a co-occurrence with substance use. Individuals that are engaging in alcohol use or smoking or marijuana use or cocaine, other stimulants, are far more likely to develop even stronger pathways to that problem gambling behavior. The clinical takeaway here is that we need to screen in multiple ways. It's not enough to just look at problem gambling by itself. We need to be screening everybody. Co-occurring mental health and substance use issues are very common, and they also increase that risk of suicidality. Was this? Okay, this is you now.
Yep. So when we are looking at who are typically diagnosed through this pathway for problem gambling and for a gambling diagnosis, we see certain patterns start to arise from that. And we break these down into kind of 3 broad categories of how we understand the prevalence of this. We look at the age and gender. We look at how the products, or what products there are, how do we access this behavior, and then what is the clinical and social vulnerability, right? So we have these 3 buckets in how we understand the prevalence. And as this audience probably knows at this point, it really targets young adults and particularly young men. And this is in part because of, if we look at who is engaging in high-risk behaviors across the board, it is typically young adults who have not yet developed their full functioning brain by the age of 25 or 27. But it is the individuals who have a hard time assessing how will I be harmed by engaging in this behavior.
Right.
And this tends to be true kind of all across all spaces of where we assess for risk, right? Men and young men in particular seem to be vulnerable when there's risky behaviors. And it's a funny story in public health. That's one of the real statistical reasons why men do not live as long as women, right? Because we tend to do dangerous things, and women are on average much more reserved in that. For the product access, so it's really important is that if you cannot access gambling and cannot engage in that behavior, you cannot get that diagnosis, right? So there does have to be an environmental infrastructure in how you access gambling. So For us, it really comes down to the usual suspects of casinos, horse racing, the lottery, and then the emergence of sports betting, poly markets, predictive markets, right? We're seeing an explosive growth of access. It's amazing to me the number of billboards that I've seen about betting just within the last year, right? So one thing that I want to really emphasize here as we're sitting on the environment and the platform in which betting exists, it seems to be taking a more economical space within our society, right? It is becoming a structural component of how we exist. So this, the salience of this group of people will be much more important in the future years. So I expect to see that this group will probably grow in that. As we look at the clinical and social vulnerability, we see the things that there are co-occurring diagnoses, such as mood, anxiety, a history of trauma. Unsurprisingly, impulsivity is a core component for being a risk factor for being prone to gambling. All right, that impulsivity makes it difficult to assess the risks. And gambling triggers the same aspects within the body, within the brain, as other addictive behaviors, right? And we're at a point in our social world where the products that we receive understand the triggers of those addictions. We are being behaviorally conditioned to behave in a certain way, such as betting, that gets reinforced so that we repeat it, right? So it is happening physiologically inside of us, and it is happening within our social environment, right? So one of the things that we'll see is as we start getting to a closer definition of how do we understand gambling, we will be moving beyond just the individual responsibility for it. Here are just some other demographic pieces. It kind of matches what we've already have stated. A little less than 50% of adults engage in some type of gambling. A little less than 20% are adolescents, and then about 10% of adolescents are doing that gambling online, right? We're seeing that the infrastructure of gambling is changing. We see that as predominantly men, making up about half. Women is still considerable at 37%, but still marginally lower than men. Right, so we can sense that the demographic here is pretty clear kind of across the board at a national level and the state level.
Now, when we consider other risk factors, a big one is the same kind of factor that is also a productive factor when used appropriately, and that is academics. Education is a gateway. It is the greatest thing that can level the playing field regardless of the class you're in, right? It is a key out of poverty for people. So what we see is academic performance, low school performance, has been very strongly linked to higher rates of problem gambling. Because, as Angela pointed out, our culture, our population in the United States, one of the big things that we have as a concept that runs through all of us is hope. The hope that we can do better. The hope our parents have that we can rise above. The hope that we can create a name and a place for ourselves. Predatory groups like gambling, payday lenders, stuff like that, prey on that concept of hope, particularly for those that fall in between these cracks of lower academic performance. So I want you all to keep that in mind. One of the things I really appreciated when you were discussing these circles is that when we talk about circles, we're not talking about boxes. A circle is something you can step outside of and move to a new one. A box is something you keep inside and you are held in. So that transition of moving from a circle away from those boxes is deeply important here. And education is one of the best ways to do that. The other risk factor that we see that's very common is impulsivity. As Dr. Miller pointed out, this is a significant predictor of problem gambling and is often associated with those individuals that are sensory seeking or have those co-occurring diagnoses of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So let's think about scope of harm now. Again, we're putting on these social scientist hats. How many of you here, show of hands, are familiar with the Rose hypothesis? It's okay, I wasn't either till this. And we'll go more into detail, but the Rose hypothesis is this concept in prevention that leads to kind of a prevention paradox. And that is a large number of people at low risk often generate more cases of harm than those at higher risk. But that paradox is, as we are developing prevention tactics, the higher risk people are the ones that get the more higher grade of attention. So we're leaving this entire group of people that are at a low risk but are generating those greater number of cases. We are leaving them in the margins for this group that is at the smaller rate. We pay more attention to the rose than we do all the flowers around it. On top of that, the ICD-11 does recognize that hazardous gambling is this pattern that, again, as Angela pointed out, appreciably increases that risk of harmful physical or mental health consequences, because what are we sacrificing when we gamble? For those of us that live in poverty, it is very expensive to do, right? When you live in poverty, the thing you are borrowing against is your own future. I can't afford the doctor. I'm going to get sick later. Now I'm out of work. I can't afford the dentist. So later I have more cascading issues. I break my toe. I walk on it because I can't afford to not miss work. I can't afford to get married, or my partner loses her Medicaid benefits. So again, when we consider the scope of harm, it's important to not just focus on the problem gambler or the definition we are currently using at a clinical level, but recognizing the social and societal community level harms.
Yeah. One of the ways that I like to think about what Jeremy's talking about here is the breadth and depth of this problem, right? We need to look at it in terms of who are we capturing when we look at the data, right? If we're looking at only problem gamblers, we are missing 90% of the other population that are engaging in gambling behaviors. When we look at who is harmed and we say it's only that individual that is harmed because it's their bank account, we're not looking at who is around this person. We are not looking at their children, their partner, their parents that they may support. It is also important to look at community wealth as a whole, right? When one person in a community prospers, other individuals within that community benefit from it, and it becomes a counter-layering component as people start to rise together. And so when one person falls, it creates risk, not only for that individual, not only for their interpersonal relationships in their family, but also as the community as a whole. And so we have to look at very specifically who all is impacted by this. So when we define it as problem gambling or a gambling diagnosis, we are missing about 90% of the suffering that comes from this type of behavior. And this slide really goes farther into that, right? And we also have a greater depth of how we can start to identify those harms. You know, above the fray, right, we're talking about a diagnosis of gambling disorder, right? It's like, oh, it's just a mental illness. No, there are subdomains that are affected beyond that. That is the depth of how we need to understand the suffering that occurs. And we are looking at, it affects the financial components. It affects the relationships. It affects the mental health. It affects workplace and school, right? And it affects other family members, right? Can you imagine the amount of stress hormones that are being pumped through someone that is experiencing these types of everyday behaviors? Right. We know that stress just starts to degrade the body, our capacities, and it takes intentional repair after that. And so one of the things about gambling is that you have to repair multiple domains within a person and their family system and their community system. right? Reclaiming financial space and autonomy, reclaiming relationships that may be severed because of the problem gambling and the suffering that you inflicted on your spouse or your partner because of the losses. Reclaiming your own mental health and self-determination, right? These are all spaces of reclamation that have to occur as we go into a recovery of gambling issues and gambling behavior. So when I talk about there's a breadth and then there's a depth of how we understand this. And when we focus on, I'm going to say this many times because it's the thesis of our presentation. So, when we only focus on problem gambling and a diagnosis, we miss the marker on many axes, right?
Yeah. And this kind of helps obscure this true scale. Again, when we looked at the previous picture, this helps better ideate it as a iceberg, right? The diagnosed pathological gambler only makes about 1 to 4% of adults in a given population. Those at-risk gamblers, those affected, is what we don't see. Based on research, one person's gambling problem typically affects up to 10 people. Those 10 people also have connections that are also affected. This is a cascading issue. When we talk about gambling, particularly the harms that we see within our community, what we're also seeing is not just a concentration of wealth and funding that you would typically see in a properly functioning community. What we are seeing is robbery by scale, a transference and a removal of wealth from communities that could use it to prosper. How many of you hit a pothole on your way in here today? Do you think those would be there if wealth was still in this community? I hope not. Problem gambling is not a simple binary 1 or 2 condition. It exists on this continuum that goes from recreational, the person that might just stop by the casino or pick up a lotto ticket or a pull tab because it's Friday and I've got the extra cash, all the way to the at-risk and the severe. That is how the DSM has started to view just about any mental health diagnosis across the spectrum. We recognize it's not an either or. Focusing only on diagnosed pathological gamblers systematically underestimates how much harm is being done to our societies, our systems, and our communities. And those significant harms even occur among those that are classified as non-problem gamblers because the way groups work, right? Groups always skew towards whoever is the greatest risk taker, right? Keith was talking with his wife this last night about a very funny story from when we were in college together. We were playing hide and go seek, and I was the more wild one in the group, and I hid up in the roof, and while the RA was yelling at us, I fell down through it. No one else decided to climb up into the roof, but the next time we played, a lot of people did.
And we shouldn't have.
And we shouldn't have, right? Thank you. Good cover. In any given group, the group starts to merge and veer towards the greatest risk-taking person in that group. And that's where we start to see problematic behaviors of gambling start to occur, even if only one person would hit that clinical quality because they influence everyone else.
May I say one thing real quick, if you don't mind going back to this previous slide? I think on a final note of this, I think you guys really understand the point of what we're saying, but I want to push us just a little bit farther. Right? I only have you for a little bit of time, so I want to push you a little bit. We very intentionally chose the word obscures, right? Because the act of focusing so narrow is an intentional choice. And a part of this group, if we want to take it seriously, is that we have to intentionally widen the scope of those definitions. A narrow scope protects a small body of people that are gaining wealth from these types of policies. And this also restricts the science and our knowledge and our understanding. It's preventing the flashlight from being shined fully into the cave, right? So we have to open the hole because of that narrow keyhole that we're looking through is intentionally small, right? And so there will be conflict that we'll have to engage in to make sure that we can understand at a much broader level.
Thank you, Keith. So now let's think about those public health impacts, right? And the way we're going to approach this is from 3 core theoretical components and frameworks. First is the socio-ecological model. And what this looks at are 4 co-occurring spheres that we see when public health has an impact. We have interpersonal, which are those biopsychological traits we all have. Age, gender identity, racial and ethnic identity or origin, even our own personality traits are all interpersonal. But no one exists in a vacuum, right? So we have a second sphere, the intrapersonal. These are our immediate surroundings. Who are our people? Our social supports. What are our values of conformity and normalization within a culture, which then brings us to our next sphere, which is organizational and community. What is available within your community? What are the resources that your community can draw upon? This is also where we start to see online gaming and gambling occur, as well as marketing towards it. And I'm going to be making a very intentional choice throughout this presentation where I am not going to just say gambling, it is also gaming. Because we are starting to see this skew younger and younger, and that is by design. It is a feature, not a bug. Gambling operators and gambling organizations, the marketing they are doing is skewing younger and younger because they are applying gaming elements. And video games themselves are borrowing from gambling organizations and routines and methods to get people hooked on their video games, which all that does is prime that young person to just make a lateral transfer right into it.
Has anybody else, I'm a parent of 2 young daughters, has anybody else banned Roblox from their children? Yes, good, very wise choice.
Speaking of banning, that leads us to our 4th sphere, social and policy. The cultural values within our family. What do we value when we make rules within a family unit? But also, how do legal regulations occur? And one of the things you will see as we get to the last part of our presentation is this hesitance by our elected officials to properly address gambling and gaming as a regulation, and trying to, again, obscure what is defined. So the next one we look at, and I touched on this earlier, is that prevention paradox, the Rose hypothesis. This society's population harm is mainly caused by low-risk groups rather than those that are clinically diagnosed. So we are seeing literally the trees for the forest. We are only paying attention to this one tree that's right in front of us because that's what is immediately present, but we're ignoring everything around it. Because if we pay attention to it, it means we have to do something. The commercial determinants of health. This is looking at it as the same lens that we would see tobacco or alcohol, their corporate playbooks occur. And we are already seeing this with the recent hearings for social media companies. And we will talk about AI and algorithms as well, so buckle up. Shaping evidence-based through industry-funded research, which means that the research has a vested interest in the industry surviving. Right? If I am being paid to say everything is fine, then guess what's okay? Everything that's happening. But this is where we start to see these domains of impact.
I hope that you guys have come to appreciate the number of metaphors. We have not yet mixed them. We have used them all properly, but we have used at least 3 or 4 different metaphors.
That's what they're for.
Yeah, which I think have actually been really good. I didn't expect the tree for the forest. I will steal that.
By all means.
Yeah. So this comes out directly from the public health literature from the Lancet and from Latvala et al. Right. So this is how the most contemporary literature that we could find starts to understand the domains of impact and the levels of impact for gambling. And we're going to dive a bit more deeply into each of these different categories. not necessarily on this slide. So treat this slide as an overview of the process, right? And so we typically talk about the negative impacts, the risks, the costs of a certain behavior, and then we also counter that with the positive impacts and the benefits. This is a very common kind of framing within public health. It most simply translates into like the risk and protective factors. So it's an expansion of that framework. And these researchers identified kind of 3 domains that seem to be most impacted throughout. They did a meta-analysis, which is like the highest level of evidence in the scientific community. And so they identified across the literature these domains, the financial impacts, the labor impacts, and the health and well-being impacts. And they also acknowledged that focusing on the individual is not enough, right? So they identified 3 levels: the personal, the interpersonal. In social work, we call this the meso, but I really like the language of interpersonal, right? Because it is about the relationships that we have with one another, because that feels tangibly real to us. And then how does that affect our communities, our neighborhoods, and then our broader society, right? So they tier it out that way.
So let's first start with personal. If we're looking at financial impacts, 83% of people experience financial problems related to gambling. That is that we know of. I'd say that's probably higher, wouldn't you? Yeah, because again, we're only looking at one. We don't exist in a vacuum. Labor impacts, we see a negative impact on productivity. If I'm worried about where my money's coming from or where I'm gonna find it, I'm not paying attention to the work I'm doing. I'm being more likely to call in sick because my stress levels are so high that my immune system suffers. The working relationships we have suffer because my productivity, my performance starts to do poorly, which means my team at work can't count on me at the same level of quality that I was trying to do before. And then speaking of those health and well-being impacts, you lose your job, where's your health insurance? Our health insurance is tied to our employment. You can't afford not to work. We start to see a decrease in health. People start to, again, think of that poverty mindset. We sacrifice our future for the now. We're less likely to see a doctor. And exercise starts to suffer as problem gambling increases. Have you ever seen someone try to do slot machines on a treadmill? No, it is a sedentary activity, right? Now let's start to think of those interpersonal, those connections we see. Our concerned significant others, 60% on average have someone that is negatively impacted if there's someone with a diagnosed problem gambling issue. Are they getting attention paid to them? Probably not. The family functioning starts to suffer because that individual is leveraging their relationships to make ends meet. And because of that, we start to see a shame for that individual that is diagnosed. And shame only teaches us to not get caught. It's not regret. Regret teaches me to want to make amends and to try to better things. But what we feel is shame. Because I don't want to get caught, I hide. I can't trust you. My family can't trust you. Your friends can't trust you. And because of that lack of trust, we're more likely to see increases in conflict and because of those risks of conflict, conflict itself is a self-feeding cycle of behavioral involvement and escalation, which is where we start to see intimate partner violence and domestic abuse. And then we see our legacies, our families and our generations is long lasting. We all have that story of that grandparent that's off their rocker, right? Or we can't remember, we don't talk to that uncle or that aunt because they stole all that money. The effects on the children in those households, because like Angela said, our country does not have a Bill of Rights for women and children, unlike many other countries across the world. The United States ain't one of them. A child has no rights. So let's think about societal. Was this one you?
Either way.
Okay, I got it. Because you're going up next anyways. Now let's think about society. Harm is not equal. It's not. We like to think of harm as harm, right? But it's across a gradient. In some places, we see disadvantaged populations being impacted far more. And because of those impacts, it only reinforces those societal and structural inequalities. Our structures, our society, our policies, our laws, and our regulations are not built with everyone in this room in mind. When those laws were made, a lot of you didn't look like the people that made them. Well, because of that, we start to see a disproportionate impact on minorities and people within the margins. They see quicker adverse consequences due to those systemic disparities, and that loss in net worth, that removal, that robbery of wealth from communities impacts them harder, which leads to worsening high environmental exposure. Populations in high deprivation areas often have higher densities of gambling venues. Again, that predation of hope, creating an overlap of geographical exposure and socio-demographic abuse. Think in your communities, where are the landfills? Are they in the nice neighborhoods? Where are the paper mills? Are they in the nice communities? Where's the electric plant? Is it in the nice communities? They can afford to not have them there because of policies that were written without them at the table. We cannot have a community without unity. We cannot have laws that are passed at a table that not everyone has a seat at.
Will you slide us back up to the matrix? So
He let me have the clicker. That's on him.
There are some benefits to gambling. They are small, but let's make sure that we take the time to identify those. So this is what has been, again, comes out of the meta-analysis of the literature across the board. And so this is an attempt to be comprehensive, and the list is still pretty small. I know the text is small here, but some of the benefits are for when you win, that's pretty good for you, right? You have the financial boon of that. You can also leverage that in an interpersonal way. You can share your winnings, you can give back to other individuals. That also, depending on, you can also create other jobs when you gain that wealth. You can also engage this in an entertainment side, right? You can bond and socialize and do the entertainment with individuals as you are engaging in these behaviors. The other piece is, if structured correctly, there is tax revenue and economic growth, right? If it is a part of a plan for tourism, if it is a part of a plan of giving substantially back to the local city, to the local state, it can be a part of that infrastructure that does have positive benefits. And this can be a part of job creation and tourism. Right? So we have seen components of those. To me personally, when reading through the literature, that list in our current state seems to be fairly inadequate. I don't think that we're engaging quite in the right policies that make the most benefit of these things. And we're seeing the harm being laid at those that are most vulnerable. That is consistent across the board, right? Is that when there are benefits, it's at the cost of the marginalized, vulnerable, and those that aren't at the table to make the policies, right? So again, this is a person in environment situation where they are interplaying with one another. And a part of that interplay is what compounds upon and builds inequities, right? And there's strategies that build into those inequities. We have targeted marketing, normalization in some communities, right? You see the billboards, you see the geofencing ads, right? Is that specific spaces? I can only imagine the colleges that are geofenced for these types of betting. So there's also a difference in neighborhood access. A lot of times it's about proximity. Do you do the lottery at the gas station? Do you have to go to the casino? Right, mobile phones become an issue here in terms of immediate access, right, or little addiction machines that we have in our pockets. I am suspect that I am addicted to YouTube. I scroll. There's also economic strain where in these vulnerable spaces, the harms accumulate a lot faster, right? I talked to you about the scaffolding of as one family raises and another family raises, that community reinforces itself. Well, when those barriers are weak, when one person experiences that financial strain, it tugs harshly on the others, right? And so the weaker those are, the more likely it is to collapse. Barriers to care. Sometimes there's stigma around the language. What we often see, especially in the payday lending spaces, and I imagine that it's similar here with gambling, is that there is a stigma about admitting how much debt you're in. How much do you owe back? But with payday lending, it targets a very specific community, right? There are literal maps of, oh, yeah, we're going to do these types of credit cards here by banking institutions, or we're going to put a payday lending institution in this community. The debt can be mapped geographically, right? Your zip code can predict your debt. More research needs to be done, but the strategies are the same. So I imagine that if we investigate it, the data will be the same. So if anyone wants to do that study, let me know. Let's go. Let's figure it out. And then as we do get into the clinical spaces where we're teaching skills, where we're doing the therapies, sometimes there's just cultural mismatches. I think that this group is one of the more culturally competent groups, just talking with you all, listening to you all speak. I think that that's one of the strengths that Kentucky has, is that it's culturally homogenous in a lot of ways, and the value systems is very clear and explicit. That's not true across all different states. I operate in Indianapolis, and there are many, many different cultures. And that's true for Kentucky, too. There's multiple cultures in some of our larger metropolitan spaces where we need to shift our thinking and how we approach those skill trainings and how we talk about those. But at a state level, there is a homogeneity that occurs. Yeah.
We get it. We take care of our neighbors here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would argue, I'm personally much more of a fan, and I think this is a credit to our fields, that cultural competence, I think, isn't enough. An effort towards cultural humility is far more important. Because when we look at competency, in many cases, when we hear that word, and I'm a big fan of words, I'm paid to talk. I'm a big fan of words, which means to me, when I hear competency, I think of a certificate, right? I am competent in this culture. That's not correct. I have no idea what it is like to be any one of you. What is more effective is emotions and feelings. Those are universal. I have no idea what it's like to be a woman. I have no idea what it's like to be middle class. I grew up in poverty. But what I do know is despair and depression and sadness, anxiety, stress, wondering where the next bill is going to be paid for and where those risk and protective factors come into play. High socioeconomic status is a very effective protective measure of gambling. Gambling disorder is a class-based one. If I lose $100 and I make $1 million a year, okay? If I lose $100 and I don't have a job, low socioeconomic status and living in poverty serve as a risk factor for someone developing a gambling disorder. Again, it comes back to hope and optimism. We are a deeply optimistic culture, despite how sometimes people like to present themselves as cynical. We want to believe the best. That is why we're in this field. We are driven by hope that we can make a difference and make an impact. And in some ways, that can be perverted into a way to take advantage and harm those that we are trying to heal. So be very careful with that. Another piece, and Dr. Miller touched on this, is parental supervision. Your kids can go on Roblox?
No, absolutely.
It is a key protective factor to help prevent adults, adolescents from gambling because there is that supervision. Those who do not receive as much supervision are more likely to develop gambling issues because there's not someone there to curb it. One of the number one protective factors across the board is the presence of at least one non-parent adult that takes a genuine interest in you. Community centers saved my life growing up. And it was because of those types of mentors that taught me that that I had a circle I could transition out of, and I wasn't in a box.
Is this all me?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So I think we've done a really good job of starting to conceptualize this ecological model, right? Again, it's awfully tiny when we need to like double the length of our presentation, I think.
Y'all got time. We'll skip lunch.
But here we really are talking about when we talk about who gets to sit at the table to make certain legislations, who gets to sit at the table to make certain policies. These things happen at a macro level. These happen at the larger layers of our society. And these drive these social determinants of health or these industry determinants of health that affect those that are engaging in the problem gambling and gambling behaviors. And so I want to really reinforce that there is a platform in which gambling sits upon, right? It is easy for us to have this conversation about personal responsibility, that it is your job as an individual to refrain from this activity. Yes, absolutely, right? There is individual accountability. We also need to create fair systems that allow people to escape those platforms when they ask and when they reach out for help, right?
Mm-hmm. We need to have these friction pieces.
Yeah. And so I want to go back a little bit to the language of when we were talking about how the problem is obscured, right? And that it is intentionally obscured in many ways, definitely at the legislative level, the diagnostic level, and the science level. And so these policies are written intentionally we can just ask ourselves, who benefits, right? With any policy we say, who benefits from this the most and who loses? And ultimately, when we look at these behaviors and we look at them at scale, and we look at them in terms of the social reality, it is wealth being extracted from a specific community, right? It is an extraction of wealth. Mm-hmm. So I'm moving into that language very deliberately because there is an intentionality to it. Whether it's whoever wrote the policy doesn't care, maybe it's an unintended consequence, but we do, right? We care because we are a part of those consequences. And so those practices, those partnerships, you see them happen at the industry level. And so there needs to be greater conversation in those spaces where we shape the platform, we shape the points of access, and we shape what does that mean in terms of revenue, taxation, and regulation. And this is not only a platform issue, right? Not only shaping the environment, but in practice, when we're working with individuals, we know that these behaviors occur in the body, right? We've talked just a little bit about it triggers the same addictive pathways as tobacco, as alcohol use, right? And so there are physical changes that occur. So when we are engaging in practice, we are to expect that there will be harm to others, that there will be community costs, that there will be debt, violences, more child welfare engagement, right? There are prices being paid in other sectors for the lack of regulation, right? So there are other industries that can be allies in this conversation, right? Many of us in here, we're working with families, and that is a wonderful place to be. And we also need to share those stories at multiple levels. We need to share those stories at the community to reduce the stigma, and we need to share those stories at the state level to have better regulation, right? There's a few other points, but I think that's the salient thread here. There's some scientific stuff, right? I've talked about if you can measure things accurately, you just get better knowledge, and you get to take that with you. So that's really important to me. But so again, if anybody wants to do research together on this, I'm totally down.
So I actually just realized while we were going through this, that's actually a copy of the same slide from earlier, so we're going to skip right past that. What you'll notice through much of this presentation is, despite the fact that both of us have backgrounds in social epidemiology and community health, we're not throwing a bunch of numbers at you, and that's by design. I've noticed and we've learned that as we throw numbers, people's eyes kind of glaze over because we all hated math class, right? Abini's having a great time. But we're actually going to start to throw some numbers now. And that's going to start with, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to single y'all out. You two we'll check later. Digitization is changing how we are being exposed, the intensity, and like Keith said, who is getting harmed. So we're going to use an example because we're in Kentucky. We're going to talk about sports wagering. Hooray. This started in September 7th of 2023 and went online about 3 weeks later. In the first year, $2.39 billion was made. 87 million was in retail. The rest of that was online. In 2025, that was 2.8 billion. It's just going up. You want to know where it's at now? Between just January to now of this year, $1.9 billion in Kentucky. We are on pace to continue going past this. The thing that we're seeing that is expanding even quicker is mobile sports betting. Like Keith said, and I'm going to steal this one from you, our little our pocket addiction device. Mobile sports betting, those micro in-play markets, the continuous online casino-style products, where legal, and really you can use a VPN and just right past that. And that convergence with gaming and financial style products, loot boxes, microtransactions. If you are playing something for free, that is because you are the product. Let's talk about casinos in our pocket, our mobile device, right? Our cell phone gives us widespread accessibility. Like we talked about with Angela, cell phones, the ability to have a cell phone at this point is a basic necessity for life. Can you apply for a job without a cell phone? Can you look for one? Can you apply? No. Most things are online now. Phones are everywhere. And in many cases, they do have the capacity, depending on what device you have or what app you have, to be paying attention to your conversations. If you look at those app permissions when you set them up, if you gave it microphone permissions, guess what it's listening to? How many of you have turned around and talked with your friend and then later that day a Google search popped up of a targeted ad based on something similar to what you had? Keith, how much about gambling did you know about prior to us working together?
Oh, not a lot.
How many ads do you now get?
Oh, tons.
This kind of goes back to that piece, right? Online gambling is one of the fastest growing sectors within the industry, but losses are in the billions for consumers. Again, you'll hear people and politicians talk about how our economics are strong. I don't have my money invested in the Dow, right? I barely have it in my bank account. What we are seeing, the things that are being harmed, are not the people that are getting the chance to make the decisions. There is a presence that it transcends borders. Technology is fantastic, just like education, at erasing boundaries for people, and again, creating circles for us to transition seamlessly in. It's also an effective way for that predation to surpass and hop and break containment. We see penetrated regions where the activity is legally prohibited or regulatory infrastructure is weak. Again, we are starting to see this on a massive scale, a transference of wealth. And part of that is, again, by design. This is a feature, it is not a bug. Products are designed for faster, more intense, and blurred forms of gambling. Before, with a slot machine, and I apologize if this creates a tender reaction for those of my participants that are in recovery, but you still had to do this. I just have to tap a button. I have my account linked to my card. I am not thinking. I am not having that friction stopping me from engaging. It's maximizing my engagement and minimizing my time of thinking. The in-play betting, the technology allows for real-time wagering, and that changes gambling from a single event to a constant series of games. We are constantly jumping. And again, for those of us that have those sensory issues, those with ADHD, that ability to quickly jump from game to game to game to game happens. And for those individuals that have issues with video game or online game addiction, we see that immediate need for constant salience occurring. And this just makes it again, lateral transfer. Digitization of traditional products, of what we traditionally pictured when we thought of gambling, is changing. We are actually, despite the fact that, as Angela pointed out, there was this huge discrepancy between lottery and historical horse racing, that is starting to skew further and further away in favor of online gaming. I don't have to go anywhere. And it especially exploded during the pandemic with the lockdown. All I had to do, I had my phone. I couldn't see my friends, but I could do this. There are quick and intense games that can be played on your phone. And again, going back to the algorithm, and this is where we're going to talk about AI, if a game is free, it's because you are the product. If you are using a social media platform and it is free, you don't have to pay a subscription for it, it is because you are the product for it. It is tracking everything you do. When we talk about AI, we get tripped up on that idea of intelligence and view it as something like a guru or something that understands what's going on, and that's not what it is. It is informed by those very same algorithms we see on social media. It is informed based on what people search for, what people do, which also creates a bias based on the marginalized who suffer and get excluded. And for agencies and corporations and operators that focus on AI as the transition for decision making, those people in the margins are getting more and more obscured and lost. We start to see marketing channels change because of that social media, the use of online influencers. When Keith, and he did this very purposely, announced and shared his background as someone who grew up in poverty, when Angela shared her background, what that did is also create a sense of understanding and kind of a sense of, I get where you're at, authority. Influencers use that too. By having this sense of relatability and being part of a culture, even if it's online, that creates a system of trust that some influencers can absolutely use to their advantage. They present gambling as a high reward lifestyle, and they ignore the negative impacts. They hide those, and again, they obscure them. And in many cases, for those that play online or stream online, they also encourage the use of channel points to wager on what they are doing, which now creates a feedback loop of me wagering on what you're about to wager, which is going to lead me to wager on what you're about to wager, and going on, and you don't even realize you're doing it because it's entertainment. The cross-selling, the recruitment, companies using consumer databases such as those on social media platforms to potentially target new consumers. Again, that geofencing that we see, that targeting of specific zip codes to make sure that we are able to prey on your hope and your optimism. This tends to trigger direct marketing for new products as they become legal, and this is where we start to see new regulatory challenges in this digital age. So this is where we're also going to start talking about prediction markets. Again, hooray. Is a prediction market gambling? Yes. Not according to the federal regulation. It is considered investment. Yeah. And this actually shows just how far behind we already are, because I had to update and make notes about this earlier today, because as of March 12th, the FTC opened and published an advance notice of proposed rulemaking allowing for public comment on the need to amend or issue new regulations concerning event contracts, which is what they called trading on prediction markets. The FTC currently regulates as the jurisdiction at a federal level for prediction markets. They currently argue that this is a federal thing and not a state oversight like we would normally see with state gambling regulations. They treat it as an investment or trading, just like you would the stock market. If state gaming jurisdiction is able to be allowed to regulate this, this would then be clarified as betting and gambling that we are well aware it is, since state gaming authorities are what typically regulate sports betting, and similar with this objective of being able to tax and regulate those funds. I'm going to throw a couple other numbers. How many of you are familiar with Polymarket or Kalshi? Couple hands. Those are the primary prediction markets we see online right now. They're free for you to make an account. Nicolas Maduro, who's familiar with that name? That was the Venezuelan president who was recently removed from power. An individual on Polymarket made $400,000 by creating a bet that he would be removed within 30 days of them coming in. Another group of users on Kalshi made $15 million betting on Elon Musk's Twitter usage. Another person made $1.2 million based on the Middle East conflicts in Iran. Is that betting or is that an investment? There's that too. These are the things that we are competing against when we are looking at these things. And I can feel some of the concern, and I am too. But when we position wagering in the same way as when we were kids saying, I bet you can't, we are creating a new and normalized idea of betting on every single thing that we breathe. And that's where policy and intervention strategies come into play. And speaking of by design, the reason why we are co-presenting is so y'all can take a breath when I'm done talking so I can drink some water. Go ahead.
All right, wonderful. At this point, we have established this frame that we've been using back and forth. The interesting thing about this presentation is that it is more of a weaving of concepts. A lot of times we receive these and the content gets chunked into blocks and then kind of divorced from each other. So if you feel like we're going back and forth,
that's by design.
It may be inelegant, and maybe we'll get better over time, but there is a reason that we're weaving these concepts back and forth. And so moving into thinking about this, we are thinking about systems. We are thinking about what are the risk factors and what are the protective factors, right? This is just the traditional critical thinking skill set that we use when understanding a social problem. And we've alluded to a lot of these. The risk factors is that the shape of gambling is changing, right? The mobile access, the high velocity products, I think that's such a wonderful phrase, in the ways in which you engage in betting that can happen quickly, effortlessly, and in a way that is always accessible, right? Is that there's very little friction that can stop you from, if you are in a cycle of betting, right? And there's ways that we can address this, right? We can say that you're only allowed to make bets every so often at certain amounts. We can do certain age restrictions, right? There are ways that we can change that friction in terms of policy. And especially if we're targeting those that have impulsivity, that are being triggered through an addiction cycle that we know that is happening physiologically, it's probably an ethical mandate that we create these frictions, right? Otherwise, it's predatory. We're saying, you can't control this behavior and we are going to profit from it exponentially. We have the 24-hour access. It also triggers individuals that have stress, trauma, adverse childhood experiences, because betting responsibly requires a lot of regulation, or choosing not to bet requires a lot of emotional and physiological regulation, right? And this occurs in the body by developing that prefrontal cortex, by having caregivers that teach us how to regulate our emotions, that have mentors in our lives that teach us to slow down and make decisions. These things that can be taught in schools, right? Social emotional learning is a key preventative tactic that we can use to create more internal physiological friction in these systems, right? And not to mention, I'm going to do a quick veer off into social emotional learning. Is when we're teaching kids how to identify their emotions, when we're teaching kids how to build relationships with one another. Not only does it make their health outcomes better when they're young adults, right? They get sick less, they get sick for much less longer. It also improves the relationships in the children around them that creates that scaffolding, right? We are talking about building the proper scaffolding of protection that occurs. And not to mention that social emotional learning not only helps with these types of disorders, such as gambling, but a multitude of others, right? So it is, I just cannot talk more about teaching that in the school systems. We have other risk factors such as impulsivity. Getting back on the ramp here. We have the aggressive marketing, the incentives, VIP programs. Anyone that games, you've probably have signed up for a battle pass, right? These are addiction processes, right? It is meant to keep you within the system, within the platform, and to not give you an off-ramp, right? And it uses multiple tactics, and we have gotten good. We have gotten real good at keeping someone within a system, thanks to gaming in many ways.
100%.
Some of the protective factors: strong social support, financial guardrails, budgeting limits, delayed funds access, early identification. Right, if we actually do provide more spaces that are easily accessible for when this starts to be a problem. Of relieving that financial strain and providing support. Healthy coping skills and access to treatment, right? So actually, if we're doing good community mental health, problem gambling is also going to be affected with some of these other types of interventions that we're doing already. We can create specific spaces for it if we're seeing a large prevalence. But good mental health in itself is a protective factor against the harms of gambling. And also doing good community organizing work, establishing norms around gambling, having open conversations, reducing that stigma, because what we have seen is that that communities themselves are the targets, right? Because an individual's loss of funds is not substantial, but if it happens at scale and you're extracting that wealth at a systematic way, then it becomes profitable to do so. And so you have to buffer that at a community level. So I would not be surprised if it happens at a geographic space.
I would argue another protective factor that we don't have on here is poverty alleviation measures. Investing in our communities. One of the best ways to prevent gambling predation of hope is for me to be able to afford my food already, right? I don't need to bet on making $100 when I already have it in my pocket. And by stopping that initial step, because for those of us that work with individuals that are diagnosed with problem gambling, we realize after a while it's not about the money, but it was at one point. If we can stop it there, we can stop it anywhere.
All right, so there are tiered ways that we can address this in terms of public health actions. And we have walked through these layers, right? We can do some universal preventions, which happens at the policy level. We can do product protections, restrictions, regulations. We can also create more friction require more friction on these platforms, that reduce ad limits, that reduce incentives, that make it easier to escape certain platforms. Europe does a great job of regulating battle passes in the
Yes.
game, and so I think that would be an excellent tactic to use. The other piece is that as community mental health centers, we can do selective prevention, right? We can do targeted intervention in these spaces where we talk with young adults. We can do high exposure settings, right? This is going to be your PSAs type of work.
And by that targeting, what we're targeting is not, again, thinking back to that prevention paradox, we're targeting not those at high risk that are visible, but those that are at risk. Those are in the margins that are getting, again, obscured.
We can also do early interventions. And one of the most interesting things is since there is comorbidity with gambling diagnoses, you can do early interventions for anxiety, depression, which will have similar effects to gambling addictions. And so that we already have ends for providing prevention in these spaces. And if we need to get more targeted, if it is very specific to this individual, we can do SBIRT style interventions in this as well, because the mechanisms are the same as alcohol and drug use. We can apply an SBIRT style screening to catch problem gambling as well. And I do suspect that it will become more common, especially as our economy has a larger section of gambling.
Just a quick aside, how many in the audience know what SBIRT is? Couple? Okay. So SBIRT is an acronym. It's Screening, Brief Intervention, Referral, and Treatment. So it's meant as a short-term way of addressing issues by first screening where someone might have a problem or a concern, providing that brief, immediate intervention, and then referring them to continued treatment. And it is a very effective form of prevention and a very effective modality in therapy.
As we are approaching this clinical level, the traditional evidence-based practices should also be very effective and have shown to be effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, those are actually usually tied side by side with SBIRT screenings anyways. So those modalities should work very similarly. At an institutional level, normalize screening for these kinds of things. Allow clients to be able to assess for financial harms, establish safety, right? This comes into a kind of financial literacy space. We can do financial literacy and also acknowledge that sometimes we just don't earn enough. You can't squeeze more blood from a rock, right? So we can become literate and advocate for an increased minimum wage at the same time, right? Greater employment as well. Those things are not mutually exclusive. That happens sometimes in conversations in my space where someone will be very much against financial literacy courses. And I was like, yes, as long as it's also paired with policy and advocacy measures to increase the capacity. Because I agree that it is a both and situation. Also, warm handoffs for specialty care and peer supports, right? As we're building community health infrastructure, there are ways that we should be doing the warm handoffs in all the different specific ways, specific interventions that we're doing. One of the things is if relationships, emotional regulation is a protective factor, building that safety in that relationship can protect them as you move them and help them navigate your institution. Right? Partner with other community organizations to reduce the stigma. Targeting this at a community level, right? Using the institutional power within our communities, not just me with a billboard or a sign out saying, if you've gambled, it's okay, I can help, right? You know, it's a coordinated effort.
And speaking of those population safeguards, Dr. Clark astutely pointed out the current legislation to raise the minimum age for online betting to 21. That is great if it is paired with more things to protect that person. Age is just a number. It is so easy to get past that. When I'm online, I look like anybody. there has to be more. The conceit of responsible gaming and responsible gambling as the only prevention tool is ineffective when it's not supported by policies and structural systems to protect that person. And that leads us into our closing statements here. And I really, especially for those of you in epidemiology, this is a very big piece. If your metric of measure is too narrow, your response is too small. Problem gambling is a very useful term, but it is a poor metric to measure population level harms. Because that harm.
Yeah. So, because again, this goes back to choose your metaphor, right? Is it an iceberg? Mm-hmm. Is it the tree instead of the forests? Is it that we're looking through too small of a keyhole? Right? Any of those metaphors work perfectly fine because we want to get to both the breadth and the depth of the issue, right?
And that level of equity requires us to pay attention not just to the exposure of those at risk of being harmed, but the resources and barriers we as community partners and leaders within our community can bring to bear to protect those most vulnerable in our communities, to instill hope that is not predatory and optimism that is well placed and grounded in reality. And that kind of public health response, in order for it to be truly effective, cannot be responsible gambling alone. It has to combine product, policy protections with that screening, that early intervention, and that treatment.
Here are our receipts for academic rigor.
We did our homework.
And yes, I guess we can open up the floor for questions. I want to acknowledge this operated much like a survey of topics, but I hope that what you take away is that you can explore in depth any one of those pieces. This could probably be 5 different presentations if we wanted it to be, but they are all connected by a golden thread, right? That there is a golden thread of how this operates, and understanding the linkages is important. So I just wanted to thank you all and just open the floor.
Yes, sir.
Hey.
You can just say there. It's all right, buddy.
First of all, I want to comment on the first 2 presentations of the day. I think they're outstanding, and I think they definitely ought to come into the thinking about gambling. But the first thing I thought about as you developed your point is that you really made a major change in the definition of gambling.
Yes.
If we go back to the early presentations to this organization, there was one requirement for something to be gambling.
Yes.
And we argued about that at the National Gaming Impact Study Commission in the 70s and so on. But the irreducible minimum for gambling was that it be a random event.
Correct.
That the underlying probabilities came randomly. And that was the basis of Fisherian statistics, trying to predict agriculture production and other things like that. And it was a reality of the kind of things that were called gambling, like a horse racing. It had to be based on a random event. Now, what you're talking about is very much broadening the idea of gambling.
Correct.
And that is that gambling is any process that people wager on. And that's a very big difference, because in the first instance, we were very concerned about what's going on in the brain of the individual. And we tried to predict that, and eventually it brought us to the midbrain. It brought us to something that we published on, and that is addictions without substance. That it didn't require a chemical for it to be gambling. That it could be something else. But now what you're saying is that you're looking at the behavior of the human being, and we know from the research that human beings are almost ignorant about how to generate a random process.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about betting on something that Musk would do, or trying to predict the
Yes.
behavior of a softball player versus a baseball player and so on, in that instance, we're talking about something that is not random, but is very difficult to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And the contribution of AI is that it has a much greater ability to process data than the human being has.
Mm-hmm.
There was an article back when I was in graduate school, and that's a day or two ago, that we human beings operate on the magic number 7 plus or minus 2.
Yes.
And that has been throughout history
Mm-hmm.
and now. And we're changing the idea of gambling to anything that somebody wagers on.
Yes.
And
So,
not that they're trying to predict a random event.
correct.
Now, pathology was defined
Mm-hmm.
as believing that you can predict a random event.
Yes.
And pathological, in a clinician's view, is a person who has a belief, for example, that you can predict a random event because God is talking to you,
Mm-hmm.
or because a particular rose occurs in a particular plot.
Sure.
And the key to it is irrationality.
Yes. And I would agree to that. So what Dr. Barrett is pointing out very astutely is that is the necessity for us to change our definitions from what was the common understand vernacular. What we used to look at as a diagnosable issue was very narrow. Again, if our metric is too narrow and we're focusing on the one, we're ignoring everyone around you. And this is by and large what we're seeing across mental health by not focusing on individual diagnoses, but looking at things on a spectrum and looking at them as who all is being impacted. Yes, prediction markets are transitioning how we understand betting from betting on uncertain events to where we're betting on events based on human behavior. But it's not terribly different, but that is also the dodge that people are making by calling it investing and marketing, or rather than betting or wagering, right? And it's that same argument. So it is vital for us to understand and transition beyond what we learned when we were in school or what we've developed and what we believed, because technology is not going to stop for you. It's not going to stop because this is the information we had when we were in school or when we were professionals, because it's going to keep growing. Dr. Barrett, did you have a cell phone when you were in school?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, well, it was just yesterday. That's the point, though, right? Things don't stop for us. Yes, ma'am.
Has the idea of like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin come up in your research?
Absolutely.
I see, you know, the theory of economics is everything positive has a negative return, and I'm seeing where that it feels like that the whole scheme was built to plunge the novice, and I watched a lot of people during COVID buying into Bitcoin, and now
Sure.
there's literal machines in liquor stores and gas stations where that you can go and buy Bitcoin. And you know, I'm a substance abuse provider, and I find that in working with some groups of people that actually the behaviors around gambling in so many facets is actually the real conversations that we need to be having.
Correct.
Because I live in eastern Kentucky, I'm
Mhm.
from Corbin.
Okay, we're neighbors.
Recently, the FBI came in and finally made the, as they call them, the gray machines.
Correct.
To be removed, which was interesting for me to learn by firsthand knowledge that those people that no longer had a place to go for these gray machines,
They went online.
guess where that they went?
Yeah, they went to the gas station where they could get Bitcoin.
No, they went to, so, animal fighting has resurged where that in eastern Kentucky, this is what they're reporting to me, and they're organizing, and it's becoming much bigger again because it's something that they can control.
Correct.
And that no longer, have to worry about those machines. There's so much cultural aspects about this that affect the behavior, and I just want to make one more point, is that, I work with a population that's a lot of reentry, is that I'm working with people that are coming out of incarceration,
Still got bills to pay.
and they, gambling is a huge part of incarceration that they're bringing with them because they're this is what I'm hearing is that the obstacles and that getting resources to just stabilize is become a moving target. So criminal activity related to gambling is a way to survive.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different points. Is it Renee?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of different points that Renee brought up here, and we're going to go ahead and address them one by one, and then we'll be at about 11:45. We'll be more than happy to continue taking questions as well, particularly for those of you online as well. Hey, guys. So first part, criminality is a social construct, right? What is criminal is designed and defined by those in power against those that are not. In many cases, there are some things that are very clearly against a moral fabric or a criminal fabric because they betray the need for the communities by and large, right? Theft, very obviously a crime. But it can also become a moral component because for those in our society, while you're in prison, that prison ain't free. You get out, you have bills you have to pay. And now you have this stigma of ex-con on you as well. You still have to figure out ways to get these things paid. So you have to diverge into what would be considered criminal behavior by necessity because those bills don't disappear, right? That erodes that community harm, but it also creates that secondary community market for funding. This is where cryptocurrency comes in because I can trace a dollar bill, right? I can trace those transactions and everything like that. Cryptocurrency, by and large, and we're going to term as cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is just one version of cryptocurrency across the many, right? Cryptocurrency isn't something that's easily tracked. It goes onto a blockchain, and each one can be traced to a different system, but by and large, it's anonymous. So it's very easy for me to easily transition this to you to this. And then I turn around and transition that into financial values. It's just a newer version of money laundering. That's the easiest way to explain it because any further, my head actually starts to hurt too. But what we see, and again, when we create marginalized groups based on social responses and structural inequality, those groups don't stop having basic needs that need to be met. So if I put up a hurdle, and we talked about this earlier, if my legs are broken, I'm just going to have to walk around it, right? For individuals that are coming out of incarceration, they have broken legs because our systems put them there. And then we put hurdles and expect you to jump over it. No, I'm going to walk around. I have to still make sure my ends are met. Did that kind of address that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But yeah, no, you're 100% right. Any other questions? Anyone online? You want to just tell us we did a great job? That's fine too. We're going to break for lunch, but you guys can have to have whatever's in your kitchen. All right. So we have our contact information here. I'd be more than happy to talk shop with you. Dr. Miller, I'm going to volunteer him as well for that. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
On behalf of the council, I'd like to thank Dr. Miller
Thank you, ma'am.
and Jeremy
Thank you, ma'am.
with a little token of our appreciation. Lunch will be at 12 o'clock in the room next door. And then if you're not staying for lunch, you can go out somewhere.
Let us know.
Let us know. You'll be back by 1:30 because we will have 2 sessions at 1:30. So we'll see you then.
Way to go, buddy.